Chapter 1958. The middle-aged man sitting opposite Lin Gang was the sect leader of the Sky Sword sect, Li Ku. In the years since the Bloodblade Valley came to Wuzhou, Lin Gang had tried his best to build a good relationship with the Sky Sword sect. Hence, the relationship between the two sects was very good. Lin Gang looked at Li Ku and said, "Sect leader Li, have you considered my suggestion?" Lin Gang had invited Li Ku to attack the Sword sect together. Returning to the Sword sect and destroying the Sword sect had always been Lin Gang's goal. Similarly, Ying had been waiting for this opportunity. However, after hearing Lin Gang's words, Li Ku was silent for a moment. Then, he shook his head and said, "Valley Master Lin, the Sword sect is no longer the same as before. In my opinion, we should think twice about attacking the Sword sect." The fact that the Sword sect had forced the Black Emperor sect to retreat was no secret in the Great Thousand World. Furthermore, many people already knew that the Sword sect had 3 End Realm experts and 6 Dao Realm experts. Naturally, Li Ku also knew about this. Even the Black Emperor sect had retreated. Hence, to be honest, Li Ku was a little conservative about attacking the Sword sect. After all, the Sky Sword sect was not willing to fight the Sword sect until both sides suffered losses. Furthermore, the Sky Sword sect's strength was not even comparable to the Sword sect. Only by joining forces with the Bloodblade Valley would they have a chance of fighting the Sword sect. Because of this, Li Ku was not very enthusiastic about attacking the Sword sect. This was because there were too many dangerous and unstable factors. Hearing Li Ku's words, a cold light flashed in Lin Gang's eyes. However, he did not say anything. After all, Li Ku was the sect leader of the Sky Sword sect. Lin Gang could not influence his decision. Furthermore, what made Lin Gang even more depressed was that the Sword sect had increased its strength by so much in such a short period of time. This made Lin Gang feel even more despair. It was impossible to attack the Sword sect for the time being, but Lin Gang had not given up. He was constantly planning how to deal with the Sword sect. While the Bloody Blade Valley was planning to deal with the Sword sect had been developing better and better over the years that Xiaochen had been in seclusion. Moreover, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and even 4th senior sister Xiao Xiao had roped in many experts and genius disciples for the Sword sect. This allowed the strength of the Sword sect to reach a new level in just a few years. At this moment, the Sword sect's foundation as one of the top 10 Ling Tian sects was fully demonstrated. Although it had declined, as the Sword sect showed signs of rising again, some experts were still willing to join the Sword sect, especially those sword cultivators. After all, the Sword sect used to be a sacred place among the sword cultivators in the world. 10 years had passed since Xiaochen had gone into seclusion, and the Sword sect had gained another End Realm expert called Lin Qing. Lin Qing had joined the Sword sect and even became an elder of the Sword sect. However, when the Sword sect fell from its pedestal, Lin Qing was injured and disappeared. After that, he became a wandering cultivator. At that time, following the disappearance of the heaven-breaking Sword Sovereign, the entire Sword sect could be said to have fallen apart. Many experts left one after another. After all, in their eyes, the Sword sect without the heaven-breaking Sword Sovereign was no longer the Sword sect in their hearts. Lin Qing was one of the people who left. However, Lin Qing was still loyal. At least he had fought for the Sword sect and almost died. Originally, he didn't have any plans to return to the Sword sect. However, with the appearance of Xiaochen, Lin Qing returned. Like Zhangxing, Lin Qing also worshipped the heaven-breaking Sword Sovereign. Since Xiaochen had obtained the legacy of the heaven-breaking Sword Sovereign, Lin Qing believed that Xiaochen was the sect leader of the Sword sect. At the same time, because Xiaochen had led the Sword sect to force the Black Emperor sect to retreat, Lin Qing also recognized Xiaochen's ability. He was willing to believe that the Sword sect would rise again under the leadership of Xiaochen. Therefore, Lin Qing chose to return and join the Sword sect once more. After so many years, Lin Qing's cultivation had also broken through from the Dao realm to the current End realm. At this moment, in Zhangxing's cave, Lin Qing and Zhangxing were sitting together, drinking and chatting. It had been many years since they joined the Sword sect. Unfortunately, Xiaochen had been in seclusion all these years, so Lin Qing hadn't seen Xiaochen yet. "Brother Cangxing, when will the sect leader come out of seclusion?" Lin Qing asked after drinking a mouthful of wine. In response to Lin Qing's question, Cangxing smiled and said, "Soon. The sect leader has been in seclusion for 10 years. His cultivation should have broken through to the great circle of the immortal emperor realm." After 10 years of seclusion, Cangxing reckoned that Xiaochen was about to come out of seclusion. Lin Qing nodded slightly when he heard Cangxing's words. Then, he sighed and said, "Back when the Sword Sovereign was still alive, the Sword Sect was so glorious. Now, it has fallen to such a state. Brother Lin Qing, it's true that the Sword Sovereign has left. However, I believe that under the sect leader's leadership, the Sword Sect will rise again and become one of the top 10 sects," Cangxing said confidently when he heard Lin Qing's words. Xiaochen was the successor chosen by the heaven-breaking Sword Sovereign. As such, Cangxing would unconditionally support and trust Xiaochen. Moreover, after Xiaochen became the sect leader, he had done a series of things that made Cangxing believe that the heaven-breaking Sword Sovereign had chosen the right person. Lin Qing nodded slightly when he heard Cangxing's words. "That's right. Since he is the person chosen by the Sword Sovereign, I believe that he will be able to lead the Sword Sect to rise again." "Ha, Brother Lin Qing, speaking of which, you haven't seen the sect leader yet. However, I think that the sect leader will be happy to see you." Cangxing laughed and said. Xiaochen was naturally happy to see Lin Qing. There was no doubt about that. After all, Lin Qing was an End Realm expert. For him to join the Sword Sect now was like sending charcoal in the snow for the Sword Sect. Moreover, it wasn't just Lin Qing. Even 2 Dao Realm experts joined the Sword Sect these few years. With that, the strength of the Sword Sect's upper echelon was much stronger than when they fought the Black Emperor sect 10 years ago. There were 4 End Realm experts and 8 Sword Head level Dao Realm experts. With such strength, they could pretty much charge into the top powers. Not only the upper echelon, but the elders, deacons, and various disciples had also become much stronger. Not only in quantity, but also in quality. When Xiaochen came out of seclusion and saw this scene, even Xiaochen himself would be shocked. The current Sword's Gate had changed from its previous state of decline. It had begun to flourish like the rising sun, and its strength was constantly increasing. Cangxing had always been aware of this, and he was extremely gratified in his heart. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1959. The Sword Sect could be said to be rising day by day. All of this was the result of everyone's hard work. Another month passed and Xiaochen finally came out of the Heaven Spirit Pagoda. After 10 years of seclusion, with the help of the Heaven Spirit Pagoda, Xiaochen's cultivation had successfully broken through to the peak Celestial Emperor realm. When Xiaochen came out, Cangxing, Wu Huan, Zhou Song, Lin Qing, and the others were the first to welcome him. Seeing Cangxing and the others, Xiaochen walked out of the Heaven Spirit Pagoda and said with a smile, "Thank you for your hard work." "Sect leader is too serious," Cangxing smiled and replied. Then, he introduced Lin Qing to Xiaochen. He heard that while he was in seclusion, the Sword Sect's strength had greatly increased. Not only did Lin Qing choose to join the Sword Sect, but there were also 2 Dao Realm experts who joined the Sword Sect. As for the elders and deacons, their strength increased by a lot. Just like what Cangxing said, Xiaochen was naturally delighted to see Lin Qing. With one more End Realm expert, it meant that the Sword Sect had become stronger. Under the escort of Cangxing and the others, Xiaochen and the others came to the main hall of the Sword Sect. That day, Xiaochen used his identity as the Sword Sect leader to announce that Lin Qing would become the deputy sect leader. At the same time, the 2 Dao Realm experts would become the Sword Heads. Following Xiaochen's announcement, the number of vice leaders of the Sword Gate had increased to 4, and the number of Sword Heads had increased to 8. Compared to 10 years ago, the Sword Gate's strength had increased significantly. It was good to have a strong foundation. At least it saved Xiaochen a lot of trouble. Thinking about it, if the sword sect didn't have such a strong foundation, these experts probably wouldn't have chosen to join the sword sect. That night, Xiaochen personally hosted a banquet to welcome Lin Qing and the rest. Lin Qing naturally did not reject this invitation. This was the first time he had met Xiaochen. Lin Qing had a good impression of Xiaochen. Apart from being a little too young, Xiaochen completely met Lin Qing's standards in all other aspects. Moreover, Xiaochen was very talented and was the successor of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign. As a result, Lin Qing naturally accepted Xiaochen wholeheartedly. The banquet lasted until late at night before everyone left. In the next few days, Xiaochen spent most of his time with Qin Shuru and the other girls. When they heard that Xiaochen had come out of seclusion, Qin Shuru and the other girls naturally did not have time to cultivate. After all, this time, Xiaochen had been in seclusion for 10 years. Qin Shuru and the other girls naturally missed Xiaochen very much. After spending some time with Qin Shuru and the other girls, Xiaochen also met Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the Wine Taoist. Ever since they came to the sword sect, the three of them had been extremely diligent in their cultivation. Now, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the Wine Taoist had all broken through to the immortal emperor realm. In just over 10 years, the cultivation of the three of them had already risen to the immortal emperor realm. Such an improvement was undoubtedly extremely huge. Xiaochen was certain of their progress. At the same time, he also told the three of them that they could go to the Heaven's Spirit Tower to cultivate in seclusion. They could only break through to the enlightenment state after their cultivation had risen to the complete immortal emperor realm. After cultivating in seclusion in the Heaven's Spirit Tower for 10 years, Xiaochen knew that the Heaven's Spirit Tower was of great help to Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the other two girls. In the face of Xiaochen's suggestion, the three of them agreed without any hesitation. After 10 years of seclusion, Xiaochen was able to relax for half a month. Then, he once again devoted himself to cultivation. At the same time, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, the Wine Taoist, and Qin Shuru also entered the Heaven's Spirit Tower to cultivate in seclusion. The most important task for everyone was to improve their cultivation. This time, Xiaochen also planned to break through to the enlightenment state. After all, his current cultivation had completely stabilized at the great perfection of the immortal emperor realm. He had vaguely touched the threshold of the enlightenment state. He found Zhou Song and Wu Huan. The two of them were end realm experts. They would obviously be of great help to Xiaochen in breaking through to the enlightenment state. The three of them sat together. Xiaochen held a pill the size of a longan in his hand. This pill was called the Enlightenment State Pill. It was a pill refined by the Dan Valley. It could help cultivators break through to the enlightenment state. Junior brother, the enlightenment state is all about the word enlightenment. Enlightenment of the Tao, enlightenment of the heart, and enlightenment of the enlightenment state. If you can comprehend it and break through, success will follow naturally. Sitting beside Xiaochen, Zhou Song also told Xiaochen some things to take note of when breaking through to the enlightenment state. To break through to the enlightenment state, one couldn't just blindly cultivate. If one couldn't comprehend it, one might not be able to break through for the rest of one's life. This was also why some people were unable to break through to the enlightenment state in their entire lives. Some people might be able to easily break through to the enlightenment state after a moment of enlightenment. The enlightenment state was all about the word enlightenment. If one could comprehend the tunnel and break through, if one couldn't, then no matter how one cultivated, it would be useless. Hearing Zhou Song's words, Xiaochen nodded slightly. Then, Zhou Song and Wu Huan left the secret room. Xiaochen went into seclusion to break through to the enlightenment state. After leaving the secret room, Wu Huan looked at Zhou Song and asked, "Second senior brother, how long do you think junior brother will take to break through to the enlightenment state?" "It's hard to say. After all, breaking through to the enlightenment state is about comprehension. It might be fast, or it might be slow. It's not like other realms." Hearing this, Zhou Song shook his head slightly. Back then, Zhou Song took a leap to break through to the enlightenment state. Wu Huan took half a month to break through to the enlightenment state. Fourth junior sister Xiao Xiao only took 3 days to break through to the enlightenment state. Therefore, it was hard to say how long it would take to break through to the enlightenment state. Hearing Zhou Song's words, Wu Huan nodded slightly. Indeed, no one could say for sure how long it would take to break through to the enlightenment state. It might be fast, or it might be slow. He had already taught Xiaochen everything he could. As for whether he could succeed or not, the key was still Xiaochen himself. However, with the enlightenment state pill and Xiaochen's talent, it shouldn't be a big problem. While talking, Zhou Song and Wu Huan left Xiaochen's cave dwelling. In their opinion, it would take at least a few days for Xiaochen to break through to the enlightenment state. However, after the two of them left, only one night had passed. In the morning of the second day, before the sun had completely risen, a strong aura suddenly soared from Xiaochen's cave dwelling. Feeling this aura, Zhou Song and Wu Huan, who were still meditating with their eyes closed in their respective cave dwellings, suddenly opened their eyes. A trace of shock flashed across their eyes. He broke through? In just one night, Xiaochen had broken through to the endless state. Zhou Song and Wu Huan were shocked. After a while, the two of them appeared outside Xiaochen's cave dwelling. Sensing the aura that had just broken through to the enlightenment state, the two of them couldn't help but shake their heads and laugh. Little junior brother is really... Is this the legendary epiphany? He actually broke through in one night. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1960. Zhou Song and Wu Huan didn't know what to say. Not only the two of them, but Sang Xing and Lin Qing also rushed to Xiaochen's cave. When they saw Zhou Song and Wu Huan, Sang Xing was the first to speak. Sect leader broke through just like that? He comprehended in one day and broke through in one night. Zhou Song smiled bitterly. Xiaochen breaking through in one night made Zhou Song speechless. When they heard Zhou Song's words, Sang Xing and Lin Qing also smiled bitterly. However, they couldn't help but become excited. The higher Xiaochen's talent was, the better it was for the sword sect. Only with enough talent would Xiaochen have a chance to break through to the end realm. As for Sang Xing and the others, they probably wouldn't be able to break through to the end realm. Moreover, if the sword sect wanted to return to the top 10 Ling Tian sects, they needed a supreme existence above the end realm. Therefore, the higher Xiaochen's talent was, the better it was for the sword sect. Just as the four of them were talking, Qing Yao slowly walked out of the cave and bowed to Sang Xing and the others. Vice sect leader, my young master invites you. Without Xiaochen's permission, Sang Xing and the others naturally couldn't casually enter Xiaochen's residence. Since Qing Yao came to invite them, it was obvious that after Xiaochen came out of seclusion, he sensed the arrival of Sang Xing and the others. They walked to the front hall and saw Xiaochen, who had just broken through. The four of them immediately cupped their hands and congratulated him. Congratulations, sect leader, for breaking through to the enlightenment realm. Don't tease me. I'm just in the enlightenment realm. I'm still far from the sect leader of the sword sect. Have a seat. Xiaochen smiled. Indeed, although Xiaochen had broken through to the enlightenment realm, he was still far from the sect leader of the sword sect. To truly have the same cultivation as the sect leader of the sword sect, he had to be at least in the end realm. However, although Xiaochen was still far from the end realm, Xiaochen's cultivation speed was enough to make one blush with shame. Although Xiaochen could use the resources of the sword sect as he wished, even with such a huge amount of resources, if Xiaochen didn't have enough talent and ability, he still wouldn't be able to break through so quickly. This was why Sang Xing and the others respected Xiaochen's talent. With such talent, along with the huge amount of resources from the sword sect, in the eyes of Sang Xing and the others, it was only a matter of time before Xiaochen broke through to the end realm. They didn't disturb Xiaochen too much. After all, Xiaochen had just broken through and needed time to stabilize his cultivation. This was why Sang Xing, Zhou Song, and the others only congratulated him before leaving. Today, Long Qing, Xian Yuan Ling, and Qin Shuru were all cultivating in the Heaven Spirit Pagoda. After breaking through to the enlightenment realm, apart from spending time with his parents, Xiaochen used the rest of his time to cultivate. Since he had just broken through to the Enlightenment realm, his cultivation wasn't stable yet. Naturally, Xiaochen couldn't relax. While Xiaochen was cultivating, Lin Gang, Li Ku, and a skinny old man were sitting together in the main hall of the Bloodblade Valley in Wuzhou. Lin Gang said in a deep voice, "Sect leaderly, now that even the deceased demon sect has agreed to join forces, what are you hesitating for?" The deceased demon sect was also a first-rate power. Although it wasn't too strong among the first-rate powers, it couldn't be underestimated. The skinny old man sitting beside Lin Gang was the sect leader of the deceased demon sect, Old Man Bloodsoul. Hearing Lin Gang's words, Old Man Bloodsoul laughed hoarsely. His voice was like the cry of a male duck, making people feel uncomfortable. "Sect leaderly, if we take down the Sword Sect, we will split the resources of the Sword Sect between us. Moreover, the Bloodblade Valley will occupy Jianzhou. This is a good deal." The Bloodblade Valley, the deceased demon sect, and the Sky Sword sect were the three first-rate powers. Naturally, they had already discussed how to split the benefits after victory. The Bloodblade Valley wanted the entire Jianzhou, while the deceased demon sect and the Sky Sword sect would split the Sword sect equally, including the various treasures and resources of the Sword sect. The resources of the Sword sect were enough to make even the Black Emperor sect envious, let alone the deceased demon sect and the Sky Sword sect, the two first-rate powers. Originally, Li Ku was a little hesitant. He felt that even if the Bloodblade Valley and the Sky Sword sect joined forces, they might not be able to defeat the Sword sect. However, Lin Gang had used some method to convince Old Man Bloodsoul to agree to help. In this way, if the three first-rate powers joined forces, they would be able to fight against a first-rate power like the Black Emperor sect. It wouldn't be too difficult to defeat the Sword sect. Hearing Old Man Bloodsoul's words, Li Ku was silent for a moment before he said in a deep voice, "All right, we'll do as we said before. After we defeat the Sword sect, the Jianzhou will belong to Brother Lin. Senior Bloodsoul and I will split the treasures and resources of the Sword sect equally." He immediately nodded. Seeing this, Lin Gang's eyes flashed with a trace of a smile. He thought coldly in his heart, even if the Sword sect had a strong foundation, it would still be destroyed when the three first-rate powers joined forces. The three of them finally agreed to attack the Sword sect. Seeing this, Li Ku opened his mouth and asked, "When do we do it?" "Let's do it as soon as possible. Let's do it in 2 days. We won't give the Sword sect any time to prepare and catch them off guard," Lin Gang said coldly when he heard this. They didn't even intend to declare war on Swords Gate. Instead, they went straight to Swords Gate, and before Swords Gate was ready for battle, they would take down Swords Gate at lightning speed. This way, they would be able to reduce their losses. Hearing Lin Gang's words, Li Ku and the Blood Demon Old Man nodded in agreement. The three of them discussed for a while before they dispersed and began to prepare for the attack on the Sword sect. In their opinion, with the three first-rate powers joining forces, they could even fight against the Black Emperor sect. Taking down the Sword sect wouldn't be a problem at all. The only problem was how many casualties they would suffer. They were full of confidence, but the three of them clearly didn't expect that the Sword sect's development over the past decade had far exceeded their expectations. At the same time, the Sword sect's current strength was far from what it was 10 years ago. Many experts had joined the Sword sect, and many disciples had improved. All of these had caused the Sword sect's strength to undergo earth-shattering changes. Therefore, even if the three first-rate forces joined forces, they might not necessarily be a match for the Sword Gate. This was because even Lin Gang and the other two had to admit that even if the three first-rate forces joined forces, they could only contend against the Black Emperor sect. Compared to the Black Emperor sect, the current Sword Gate was not much weaker. Moreover, the Sword sect had a staunch ally, and that was the family Nangong. Therefore, this time, whether the three first-rate powers could take down the Sword sect was still unknown. However, Lin Gang and the other two didn't realize this at all. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1961. The growth and transformation of the sword sect had far exceeded the trio's expectations. After the blood demon old man and Liko left, Ying quickly entered the main hall. He looked at Lin Gang and asked impatiently, "How is it, Valley Master?" In the Bloodblade Valley, the person who wanted to destroy the sword sect the most was not Lin Gang, but Ying. As a traitor of the sword sect, Ying hated the sword sect to the core. Of course, he hated Xiaochen even more. If not for Xiaochen, Ying would not have become a traitor from the sword sect's deputy sect master. There was no day and night that did not wish to destroy the sword's gate, but unfortunately, as the sword's gate grew stronger, the hope in Ying's heart grew dimmer and dimmer. This time, when Lin Gangle said that the deceased devil sect and the Sky Sword sect would join forces, Ying was extremely excited. Seeing Ying's excited expression, Lin Gang smiled and said, "Don't worry, we've already discussed it. We'll attack the sword sect in a few days." Hearing Lin Gang's words, a smile appeared on Ying's face. At the same time, a deep hatred flashed across his eyes. Since the sword sect had betrayed him, they could not blame him for being disloyal. Especially Xiaochen. If he could take down the sword sect this time, Ying could give up everything, but Xiaochen had to be personally dealt with by him. When that time came, he would make sure that Xiaochen begged for death. Ying's smile grew even colder, as if he could already see Xiaochen falling into his hands and being tortured to a state worse than death. According to Lin Gang and the other two, attacking the sword sect should be done as soon as possible. They could not allow the sword sect any time to react, nor could they give the sword sect any time to breathe. They had to take down the sword sect in one fell swoop. Because of this, Lin Gang, the blood demon old man, and Liko acted very quickly. In just 3 days, the 3 top forces were ready to attack the sword province at the same time. The 3 top powers worked together. Amongst them, there were 4 End Realm experts and 6 Dao Realm experts. As for Comprehension Realm and Celestial Emperor Realm experts, there were many of them. Added together, there were close to 10,000 of them. With so many people moving at the same time, it was also because Tsang Xing's group moved fast enough that Tsang Xing only received the news when the 3 forces had entered the sword sect. He learned that the Bloody Blade Valley, the deceased devil sect, and the Sky Sword sect had joined forces to attack the sword sect. After hearing this news, Tsang Xing did not dare to delay and immediately told Xiaochen about it. Within the main hall of the sword sect, Xiaochen sat on the main seat. Below him were the 8 sword heads, including Tsang Xing, Zhou Song, Wu Wan, Lin Qing, and Yang Song. Sweeping his gaze across the crowd, Xiaochen suddenly revealed a cold smile. The Bloody Blade Valley really does not give up. They even joined forces with the deceased devil sect and the Sky Sword sect to attack the sword sect. What do you think we should do now? Of course we should fight. Even if the 3 sects join forces, our sword sect has nothing to fear. Hearing this, Tsang Xing was the first to speak. In terms of strength, the sword sect was not weaker than the 3 sections. In terms of Dao Realm experts, the sword sect even had the advantage in numbers. Since they had the upper hand in terms of strength and the 3 great sects had taken the initiative to attack, there was naturally nothing to say. They would just fight. Previously, they had let the Bloodblade Valley go, but this time, they dared to come knocking on their door. No matter what, they had to completely eliminate this threat. Tsang Xing's attitude was very clear. They wanted to fight. Hearing Tsang Xing's words, Lin Qing, Zhou Song, and Wu Wan all nodded in agreement. I agree with Tsang Xing's opinion. Fight. That's right. The 3 sects are courting death. How can our sword sect be afraid of fighting? Zhou Song and Wu Wan spoke one after another. Lin Qing nodded in agreement. The 4 vice sect masters had unanimously decided to fight. Hearing this, Xiaochen also nodded and said, yes, the Bloody Blade Valley is indeed a threat. So this time, I also think it's time to get rid of this potential threat in one fell swoop. After speaking, Xiaochen paused for a moment before continuing, now, the Bloody Blade Valley, the Sky Sword sect, and the deceased devil sect have attacked the Jian province from 3 different directions. Since we have to fight, we can only split up. Lin Qing. With that, Xiaochen called out in a deep voice. Hearing this, Lin Qing stood up and cupped his hands towards Xiaochen. Your subordinate is here. Lead people to the east and fight the Sky Sword sect, Xiaochen said. Yes. Wu Huan, lead people to the west and fight the deceased devil sect. As for Tsang Xing and Zhou Song, follow me. It's inevitable that we will deal with the Bloody Blade Valley, Xiaochen instructed. The three sects of the Bloody Blade Valley had attacked the Jian province from 3 different directions at an extremely fast speed. Because of this, Xiaochen made a prompt decision. Faced with Xiaochen's arrangement, Tsang Xing and the other 3 did not have the slightest objection. In the face of the sudden attack from the 3 sects, the Sword sect's reaction was not slow at all. On the same day, under the leadership of Xiaochen, they moved out in full force to meet the 3 sects' attack. They were prepared to fight. The 3 sects did not declare war, and the Sword sect's reaction was extremely unyielding. It was obvious that they wanted to fight to the end with the 3 sections. The Sword sect was going to fight again, and such a major event naturally attracted a lot of attention in the Great Thousand World. At the same time that the Sword sect reacted, the spies of the various sects in the Great Thousand World entered the Jian province one after another. They wanted to be the first to receive the latest news of the battle. No one knew how to put it. In any case, ever since Xiaochen took over the Sword sect did not seem to have any peace. More than 10 years ago, the Sword sect had just fought a battle with the Black Emperor sect. This time, they were facing the Bloody Blade Valley, the Sky Sword sect, and the Deceased Devil sect at the same time. However, the various sects in the Great Thousand World were very curious as to how strong the Sword sect had become in the past 10 years. This time, Xiaochen did not ask for help from the family Nangong. Firstly, with the Sword sect's current strength, they were not afraid of being besieged by the 3 sections. Secondly, the Bloody Blade Valley did not declare war at all. Instead, they suddenly attacked, and it was too late to ask for help from the family Nangong. With Tsang Xing, Zhou Song, and a group of experts from the Sword sect, Xiaochen headed south and soon met the Bloody Blade Valley. In the southern part of the Jian province, in a valley called the Green Pine Valley, the experts from the Sword sect and the Bloody Blade Valley met. When he saw Lin Gang and Ying, who was beside Lin Gang, Xiaochen immediately sneered. Ying, I previously guessed that a traitor like you had defected to the Bloody Blade Valley. Now, it seems that I was right. Ying had defected from the Sword sect and defected to the Bloody Blade Valley. Hearing this, Tsang Xing, who was beside Xiaochen, shouted in a deep voice. Ying, you traitor! Why don't you kneel down and admit your guilt? Perhaps the sect leader will spare your worthless life. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1962. Tsang Xing naturally didn't have a good impression of Ying. Back in the Sword sect, Ying had been coveting the position of sect master as the vice sect master. If not for Tsang Xing restraining him, Ying would have long proclaimed himself as the sect master of the Sword sect. In Tsang Xing's mind, the sect master of the Sword sect was either the heaven-breaking sword master or the chosen successor of the heaven-breaking sword master. Other than that, no one else had the qualifications. The two of them had been fighting openly and secretly when they were in the Sword sect. Now that Ying had betrayed the Sword sect and joined the Blood Blade Valley, Tsang Xing's heart was naturally overflowing with killing intent. In his opinion, Ying was a traitor. Faced with Tsang Xing's angry scolding, Ying's eyes flashed with extreme coldness. He looked at Tsang Xing and said coldly, Tsang Xing, I really don't understand. How can a child like him be the sect master? What a joke! Ying had never acknowledged Xiaochen's identity as the sect master, but it didn't matter because Xiaochen no longer needed his acknowledgement. Moreover, the Sword sect was much stronger than it had been when Ying was still around. Xiaochen didn't care about Ying at all. Tsang Xing and Ying looked at each other with killing intent. At the same time, Lin Gang spoke to Xiaochen indifferently. Xiaochen, with your ability, it's impossible for the Sword sect to rise again. Why don't you join my Blood Blade Valley? I can spare your life. Lin Gang actually wanted Xiaochen to join the Bloodblade Valley. Hearing this, Xiaochen immediately sneered. Lin Gang, you think too highly of yourself. What qualifications does your Bloodblade Valley have to make my sword sect join? This time, your 3 great sects have joined forces to besiege the sword sect. Very good. I also want to use this opportunity to eliminate your Bloodblade Valley once and for all. This way, I can remove a threat. The sword sect was definitely more powerful than the Bloodknife Valley. Lin Gang actually asked Xiaochen to lead the sword sect to join the Bloodknife Valley. Wasn't that a joke? Xiaochen rejected him without any hesitation. Hearing this, a cold glint flashed across Lin Gang's face as he said, "All right, in that case, don't blame me for being ruthless. This time, I will definitely destroy your sword sect in one fell swoop." Kill! With the 3 sects working together, Lin Gang was confident that they could destroy the sword sect. However, upon hearing Lin Gang's words, Xiaochen laughed inwardly. Did they think that the 3 major sects would be able to deal with the sword sect if they joined hands? This time, it was still unknown who would be the one to destroy who. As soon as Lin Gang finished speaking, the people from the Bloodknife Valley began to move. At the same time, Xiaochen also shouted in a low voice, "Kill!" Upon hearing Xiaochen's order, the people from the sword sect also charged towards the Bloodknife Valley without hesitation. For a moment, the experts from the 2 great sects were engaged in an extremely fierce battle. In terms of strength, the Bloodknife Valley was indeed much weaker than the sword sect. Even though the sword sect had split into 3 groups, they were still not at a disadvantage. In terms of the number of experts, the sword sect still had the advantage. However, Lin Gang did not know the true strength of the sword sect. At this moment, he was still fighting with Zhou Song and had a smug expression on his face as he spoke. "Do you think that you can stop my Bloodblade Valley? There's still the Deceased Demon sect and the Sky Sword sect. Your sword sect has arranged so many experts here. Let's see what you have to stop the Deceased Demon sect and the Sky Sword sect." Lin Gang thought that Xiaochen had used most of the strength of the sword sect to stop the Bloodknife Valley. In this way, the pressure on the Deceased Demon sect and the Sky Sword sect would be greatly reduced. When the time came, the Deceased Demon sect and the Sky Sword sect would defeat the sword sect, and the pressure on the Bloodknife Valley would naturally disappear. It was a good idea. However, Lin Gang clearly did not expect that Xiaochen did not use all of the strength of the sword sect to deal with the Bloodknife Valley. Instead, Xiaochen had also arranged for people to deal with the Deceased Demon sect and the Sky Sword sect. For Lin Gang to have such thoughts, it could only be said that his understanding of the sword sect was still too shallow. It was still 10 years ago. Little did he know that the sword sect was already on a completely different level than it was in the past 10 years. Hearing Lin Gang's words, Zhou Song did not even bother replying to him. Instead, he attacked even more fiercely. Xiaochen only had one order for Lin Gang and Ying, and that was to kill them. Therefore, Zhou Song did not give Lin Gang any chance at all. He attacked with all his strength. At the same time that Xiaochen had started fighting with the Bloodknife Valley, on the other side, Wu Huan and Lin Qing led the experts of the sword sect to fight with the Deceased Demon sect and the Sky Sword sect. Unlike Lin Gang, Xiaochen did not use all of the strength of the sword sect to deal with the Bloodknife Valley. Similarly, Xiaochen did not let down his guard against the Deceased Demon sect and the Sky Sword sect. At this moment, Wu Huan was fighting with the Blood Demon Old Man, the leader of the Deceased Demon sect. At the same time, it was obvious that the sword sect had the upper hand in the battle below. He did not expect that the sword sect would counterattack so fiercely. However, the Blood Demon Old Man had the same idea as Lin Gang. The more pressure he was under, the less pressure the Bloodknife Valley and the Sky Sword sect would be under. When the time came, the two sects would be able to directly attack the sword sect's base. As long as the sword sect's base was destroyed, the Blood Demon Old Man's threat would naturally be eliminated. His thoughts were exactly the same as Lin Gang's. However, what the Blood Demon Old Man didn't expect was that while he was under a lot of pressure, the Bloodblade Valley and the Sky Sword sect were also under a lot of pressure. Needless to say, even the Sky Sword sect was locked in a fierce battle against the sword sect experts led by Lin Qing. Li Ke's face darkened as he fought with Lin Qing. You are Lin Qing? Have you joined the Swords Gate?" he asked in surprise. Previously, Li Ke, Lin Gang, and the Blood Demon Old Man had investigated the strength of the Sword Sect. However, at that time, there were only 3 End Realm experts in the Sword Sect. They were Tsang Xing, Zhou Song, and Wu Huan. But now, Lin Qing had suddenly appeared. This clearly messed up the plans of the 3 of them. Facing Li Ke's shock, Lin Qing said with a cold smile. "Do you think that the 3 of you working together can deal with the Sword Sect? Let me tell you the truth. In these 10 years, the strength of the Sword Sect has far exceeded your imagination. Are you thinking that since you are under such great pressure, the pressure on the Blood Knife Valley and the deceased demon sect should be much less? What a joke! Let me tell you, the pressure on the deceased demon sect and the Blood Knife Valley is no less than yours." As he spoke, Lin Qing slashed out with his sword. Due to the previous shock, Li Ke was stunned for a moment and was forced back by Lin Qing's sword. He stabilized his body and a complicated expression flashed across his eyes. He had miscalculated. He had really miscalculated. He thought that with the 3 sects working together, they would be able to deal with the Sword Sect. Who would have thought that the Sword Sect's strength would be so much stronger than 10 years ago? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1963. As he was distracted, he was forced back by Lin Qing's sword. Actually, Li Ke and Lin Qing knew each other before. After all, they were both sword cultivators and were both at End Realm. Their strengths were on the same level. So in the past, Lin Qing and Li Ke had come into contact several times, although they weren't close. Because they knew each other, Li Ke was so surprised when he saw Lin Qing. He really didn't expect Lin Qing to join the Sword Sect. No, it should be said that Lin Qing returned to the Sword Sect. After all, Lin Qing was an elder of the Sword Sect. After forcing Li Ke back with one sword, Lin Qing didn't continue to attack. He had other thoughts in his heart. Bloodblade Valley, Deceased Demon Sect, and Sky Sword Sect. Among these 3 sects, the weakest was undoubtedly the Sky Sword Sect. Moreover, the Sky Sword Sect had some ties with the Sword Sect. When the Sword Sect was at its peak, the Sky Sword Sect was actually a subsidiary sect of the Sword Sect. At that time, the previous sect leader of the Sky Sword Sect, who was Li Ke's master, wanted to bring the Sky Sword Sect into the Sword Sect and become a true member of the Sword Sect. Unfortunately, the Sword Sect didn't care about the Sky Sword Sect at that time, so they rejected Li Ke's master. Actually, there was nothing strange about this. After all, when the Sword Sect was at its peak, the 2-word Sword Sect represented all the sword cultivators in the world. Any sword cultivator in that era would feel proud to be able to join the Sword Sect. Since the Sky Sword Sect and the Sword Sect had such a relationship, and everyone in the Sky Sword Sect were sword cultivators, wouldn't the strength of the Sword Sect increase tremendously if they could pull the Sky Sword Sect over? Lin Qing had his reasons for wanting to recruit Li Ke. First of all, no matter how much the Swords Gate had declined, it was still once glorious. Some things that were deeply ingrained in their bones were not something that could be easily changed. For example, the longing that sword cultivators had for the Sword Sect still existed to this day. Some sword cultivators still wanted to join the Sword Sect. It was precisely because the Sword Sect had such a glorious past that the entire Sky Sword Sect did not reject the Sword Sect from the bottom of their hearts. Frankly speaking, the reason why Li Ke had joined forces with the Bloody Blade Valley and the Deceased Demon Sect to attack the Sword Sect was because he wanted to obtain the foundation of the Sword Sect. After all, that was something that all sword cultivators yearned for even in their dreams. He was tempted by benefits, but from another perspective, he was immediately tempted by benefits. This proved that there was something in the Sword Sect that attracted him. In this case, Lin Qing could also use this method to rope in Li Ke. He already had a plan in mind. At the same time, Li Ke attacked with his sword. Seeing this, Lin Qing raised his sword to block. Li Ku, this time, you led the Sky Sword sect to attack the Sword sect because of the foundation of the Sword sect, right? After all, to sword cultivators, the Sword sect was like a holy land. Hearing Lin Qing's words, Li Ku did not understand what he meant. He frowned, but he did not retort. So what if it is? Li Ku agreed to join forces with Lin Gang and the Blood Demon Ancestor because of the foundation of the Sword sect. Hearing this, a smile flashed across Lin Qing's eyes. The Bloody Blade Valley should be in Wuzhou now, right? Li Ku, what do you think of the Sky Sword sect's strength compared to the Bloody Blade Valley? Lin Qing asked. However, he did not immediately answer this question. It was not that he did not know the answer, but that he did not want to answer. Compared to the Bloody Blade Valley, the Sky Sword sect was naturally weaker. Not to mention other things, just in terms of End Realm experts, the Bloody Blade Valley was stronger than the Sky Sword sect. After all, in the entire Sky Sword sect, Li Ku was the only End Realm expert. On the other hand, the Bloody Blade Valley had Ying and Lin Gang. Seeing that Li Ku's face sunk, but he did not answer, Lin Qing did not mind and continued to speak slowly. It seems like you know the answer. Let me ask you, if the attack on the Sword sect fails, what will happen after the Sky Sword sect and the Bloody Blade Valley return to Wuzhou? Lin Qing continued to ask. Facing this question, Li Ku did not answer, and Lin Qing continued to speak without caring. Let me tell you, if the attack on the Sword sect fails, the Bloody Blade Valley's next target will be your Sky Sword sect. At that time, the Bloody Blade Valley will want to dominate Wuzhou and destroy your Sky Sword sect. A mountain could not accommodate two tigers, this was a very normal thing. Just like the Sword School and the Blood Saber Valley from before. Because they were both in the Jian province, the two sects could be said to be in a situation where only one side would rest. After all, no one wanted another to sleep soundly beside their bed. A cold glint flashed across Li Ku's eyes when he heard Lin Qing's words. However, he quickly hid it. After which, he said in an indifferent voice, Lin Qing, there is no need to use such a childish tactic to sow discord. Li Ku thought that Lin Qing was trying to sow discord. Hearing this, Lin Qing laughed out loud. Ha, sow discord? I'm not that bored. Moreover, with the strength of my sword sect, why would I need to sow discord? This time, even if the three sects work together, if we fight to the death, the winner will be my sword sect. There is no doubt about that. After hearing that he was trying to sow discord, Lin Qing laughed loudly. His words were full of arrogance, as if the sword sect did not put the three sects in their eyes. Facing Lin Qing's laughter, although Li Ku's face sank, he did not refute because this was the truth. They had underestimated the strength of the sword sect. Seeing that Li Ku did not refute his words, Lin Qing quickly stopped laughing and took the initiative to retreat. Not knowing what Lin Qing was trying to do, Li Ku also stopped what he was doing. The two of them looked at each other. At this moment, Li Ku finally realized that Lin Qing probably had other intentions. He immediately asked in a deep voice, Lin Qing, what exactly do you mean? Nothing. I just wanted to say that you should think about the Sky Sword sect. You? Hearing Lin Qing's words, Li Ku was taken aback. Then, he shouted angrily. However, Lin Qing did not give Li Ku a chance to speak. As soon as Li Ku opened his mouth, Lin Qing spoke first. Li Ku, come to my sword sect and lead the people of the Sky Sword sect to join the sword sect. This is your best and wisest choice. Otherwise, it won't be long before the Sky Sword sect is annihilated. After saying so much, Lin Qing finally expressed his thoughts and extended an olive branch to Li Ku, inviting him to join the sword sect and lead the entire Sky Sword sect to join the sword sect and become a part of the sword sect. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1964. Li Ku, come to my sword gate. Hearing Lin Qing's words, he was stunned for a moment before he shouted coldly. Lin Qing, are you joking? My Sky Sword sect is attacking the sword sect right now, and you want to rope me in? The Sky Sword sect and the sword sect were enemies, but Lin Qing was trying to rope in Li Ku and the entire Skysword sect. Wasn't this a joke? Lin Qing didn't seem to mind Li Ku's words at all. Do you think I'm joking? As for the enemy you speak of, to be honest, the Skysword sect isn't strong enough to become the Sword sect's enemy. Lin Qing's words were very arrogant, and Li Ku's eyes flashed with anger. After all, he was the sect master of the Skysword sect. It would be strange if he wasn't angry when someone spoke to him in such a manner. However, Lin Qing acted as if he didn't see the anger on Li Ku's face. He continued to speak with a smile. Think about it yourself. If we fail to attack the Sword Gate this time, what will your Skysword sect face? Moreover, although our Sword Gate has declined now, in a short 10 years, our Sword Gate's improvement is obvious to all. I believe you have a deep understanding of this. Moreover, the current sect master of the Sword sect is the successor of the Skysplitter Sword Sovereign. Although he is young, his talent is outstanding. In a short 10 years, he has broken through to the realm of enlightenment. Can't such a person help the Sword sect rise again? Finally, although our Sword sect's strength is far from its peak, we have preserved most of our foundation. With this foundation and a new sect master, do you think the Sword sect can't rise again? Li Ku, think about it carefully. Is it better to be the sect leader of the Heavenly Sword sect or the vice sect leader of the Sword sect? With your cultivation, if you join the Sword sect, I, Lin Qing, can guarantee with my life that you will definitely become the vice sect leader of the Sword sect. When the Sword sect rises, your status will be unimaginable. Moreover, isn't joining the Sword sect your master's wish? Li Ku fell silent when he heard that. Lin Qing's words did make sense. If they failed to attack the Sword sect this time, the Skysword sect would definitely fight with the Bloodblade Valley. Regardless of whether they won or lost, it was not something the Skysword sect wanted to see. Moreover, with the strength of the Skysword sect, it was indeed too difficult to defeat the Bloodblade Valley. There was almost no chance. Moreover, Lin Qing also said that if Li could join the Sword sect, he could definitely become the vice sect leader of the Sword sect. Although it was only a vice sect leader, in terms of power and status, the vice sect leader of the Sword sect was obviously much more powerful than the sect leader of the Skysword sect. Lastly, and also what Li Ku valued the most, was Lin Qing's last sentence. It had always been his master's wish to merge the Skysword sect into the Sword sect. It was not an exaggeration to say that Li Ku's master was definitely the most loyal supporter of the Sword sect. In the eyes of Li Ku's master, the true top sword cultivators in the Great Thousand World should all join the Sword sect. The two words Sword sect were a type of belief in Li Ku's master. After falling silent for a while, Li Ku looked at Lin Qing and slowly said, "Will sect master Xiaochen accept my Skysword sect joining the Sword sect?" Hearing Li Ku's words, Lin Qing immediately laughed out loud. The fact that Li Ku asked this question meant that Li Ku was moved. Lin Qing immediately smiled and said, I've already said it. The Skysword sect doesn't have the qualifications to be the Sword sect's enemy. Therefore, you don't have to worry about this at all. I can guarantee it with my life. The Sword sect needed to develop quickly. Moreover, with Xiaochen's temper, Lin Qing was sure that if Li Ku agreed to join the Sword sect, Xiaochen would definitely not reject it. As for whether Li Ku would be loyal after joining the Sword sect, there was no need to worry about this at all. Because even if Li Ku had other thoughts, could the other four vice sect leaders, Song Xing, Lin Qing, Zhou Song, and Wu Huan, be just for show? Four of them couldn't take down Li Ku? It could be said that if Li Ku joined the Sword sect, it would only benefit the Sword sect. This was why Lin Qing spent so much effort to recruit Li Ku. Xiaochen did not know what had happened between Lin Qing and Li Ku. At the place where he was, the experts of the Sword School were already engaged in a fierce battle with the people of the Bloodblade Valley. Song Xing was fighting Ying, while Zhou Song was fighting Lin Gang. However, between End Realm experts, it was hard to determine a victor in a one-on-one situation. Therefore, even if Xiaochen really wanted to kill Lin Gang and Ying, it would be very difficult for him to do so. After all, the difference in strength between the four of them wasn't that big. It was too difficult to kill them in a one-on-one situation. After all, End Realm experts were especially easy to kill. However, Xiao Chen couldn't interfere in an End Realm level battle. Not to mention End Realm experts, Xiao Chen didn't even have the ability to interfere in a Dao Realm level battle. Although he had already broken through to the Comprehension Realm, Xiao Chen was very clear that there was still a huge gap between him and true experts like San Qing. Therefore, Xiao Chen didn't take the initiative to search for the Bloodblade Valley experts. Instead, he fought with an elder who was at the small completion realm of comprehension. Xiao Chen had just broken through to the comprehension realm and was only at the initial stage of the comprehension realm. However, facing this elder, Xiao Chen wasn't at a disadvantage. Xiao Chen was unable to fight someone who was of a higher realm than him. However, if they were of the same realm and there was a difference of a few levels between them, Xiao Chen would be able to fight him with his unparalleled combat prowess. At this moment, there were many blood-colored swords surrounding Xiao Chen. Sharp and powerful sword energy spread out. Seeing Xiao Chen surrounded by so many blood-colored swords, the Bloodblade Valley elders said with a gloomy expression. Sword body, you actually have a sword body. With one look, he could tell that Xiao Chen had a sword body. Such a body type was one of the top in the Great Thousand Worlds. Moreover, the sword body was the body type that all sword cultivators dreamed of. He seemed to understand why Xiao Chen would become the successor of the heaven-breaking sword Venerable. So that was the case. The sword body did indeed have such qualifications. Hearing the elder's words, Xiao Chen's expression was calm. A cold glint flashed across his eyes as he said flatly. It's a little too early to be surprised now. With that, Xiao Chen's mind moved, and countless blood-colored swords flew towards the Bloodblade Valley elder. After cultivating with Junwuya for 20 years, Xiao Chen had basically grasped how to use the sword body. Now, when he used the sword body, its power was much stronger than when he was in Hachibara Senkai. Seeing the countless blood-colored swords flying towards him, a fierce look flashed across the Bloodblade Valley elder's eyes. He then slashed out with his blade and shouted coldly. Although the sword body is strong, your cultivation is too low. What can you do? Break for me. Begging for your collection, begging for your monthly votes, begging for your recommendation. Chapter 1965. Although the elder of the Bloodblade Valley was shocked by Xiao Chen's sword body, he did not allow himself to be captured. Just as he had said, Xiao Chen's cultivation was only at the entry level of the realm of enlightenment before the sword body was displayed. He swung his blade in an attempt to shatter Xiao Chen's sword images. However, although the elder's attack struck the sword images, it did not shatter them all. The sword physique was indeed extraordinary. In particular, Xiao Chen's grasp over the sword realm was much greater than before. As a result, even though there was a difference in cultivation, it was still very difficult for the elder to gain any advantage over Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen did not lose the upper hand in the clash. The remaining blood-red swords continued to fly towards the elder. To be able to become an elder of the Bloodblade Valley with such strength, it looks like I've overestimated your Bloodblade Valley, Xiao Chen said indifferently as he looked at the elder. A cold light flashed through the elder's eyes when he heard Xiao Chen's words. His face sank as he said, "What arrogance! Shatter!" Being looked down upon by a member of the younger generation, the elder's heart was naturally filled with rage. Immediately after, he slashed out with his blade once again. Finally, he completely shattered the sword shadows that filled the sky before him. However, although the elder had blocked Xiao Chen's attack, it was only a single strike. At that moment, the surroundings of Xiao Chen and the elder were enveloped by the sword realm. Blood-red swords continuously condensed. As mentioned earlier, although the elder had blocked Xiao Chen's attack, it was only a single strike. He was unable to break through Xiao Chen's sword realm. In other words, it was impossible for him to do so with his strength. After breaking through to the comprehension realm, Xiao Chen's strength was much stronger than when he was in the immortal emperor realm. Thus, Xiao Chen was not afraid of the elder at all. Once again enveloped by the sword realm, a solemn look flashed across the elder's eyes. Although on the surface, the elder did not seem to be afraid of Xiao Chen's sword realm at all, in his heart, he was indeed very wary of Xiao Chen's sword realm. The sword physique was recognized as one of the strongest physiques in the Great Thousand World. There was no need to doubt this at all. Xiao Chen possessed the sword physique, so his strength naturally made the elder fearful. Xiao Chen did not waste any more words with the elder. He immediately swung his sword and took the initiative to attack the elder. With the support of the sword realm, the power of Xiao Chen's attack was greatly increased. Xiao Chen and the elder, Zhou Song and Lin Gang, Zhang Xing and Ying. Everyone was standing together in a pool of blood. For a moment, it was difficult to tell who was the winner. Lin Gang didn't have any advantage in the fight with Zhou Song, but neither did Zhou Song. However, Zhou Song didn't give Lin Gang any time to catch his breath. He had been suppressing Lin Gang all the time. Lin Gang had to be careful in the face of Zhou Song's ferocious attacks. At this moment, Lin Gang sneered as he fought with Zhou Song. "Zhou Song, you and I are equal in strength. It's impossible for you to kill me. Now that the sword sect and my Bloodblade Valley are fighting fiercely, what about the other two sides? Have you thought about it?" Lin Gang still felt that the sword sect had placed most of their strength on the Bloodblade Valley. In this way, the Sky Sword sect and the Deceased Demons sect would be under less pressure. Lin Gang even felt that the Sky Sword sect and the Deceased Demons sect might have already reached the foot of the sword sect. He thought that the Deceased Demons sect and the Sky Sword sect had already broken through the sword sect's defensive line. Unfortunately, he was too naive. Just as Lin Gang finished speaking, a voice full of ridicule rang out. "Lin Gang, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed." "Who?" Lin Gang was stunned when he heard this voice. He immediately asked in a deep voice. Following Lin Gang's shout, Lin Qing and Li Ke's figures slowly appeared on the horizon. When he saw Li Ke, Lin Gang was confused at first. However, he was soon overjoyed. "Li Ke? Ha! It seems that you've already taken care of the sword sect." Lin Gang did not know Lin Qing. When he saw Li Ke appear, Lin Gang naturally thought that Li Ke had come to help him. However, when he heard Lin Gang's words, Lin Qing, who was standing beside Li Ke, laughed disdainfully. "You're so silly that you're cute." Lin Qing did not hide his disdain for Lin Gang. When he finished speaking, Lin Qing turned to look at Li Ke and said, "Brother Li, this is your chance to show off. Join the sword sect and prove your allegiance." "Brother Lin, don't worry. I know what to do." Li Ke smiled faintly when he heard Lin Qing's words. Lin Gang thought that Li Ke had come to help him, but he did not know that this was not the case. Li Ke had come here because he had already decided to join the sword sect. Lin Qing had tried to rope him in before, so Li Ke had finally made his choice. Compared to the Heavenly Sword sect, just as Lin Qing had said, joining the Sword's Gate was the best choice. Furthermore, the position of the Vice Sect Master of the Sword's Gate was definitely not inferior to that of the Sect Master of the Heavenly Sword sect. In fact, the Vice Sect Master might even be stronger. Humans strive for greater heights. Moreover, it was Li Ke's master's wish to merge the Sky Sword sect into the Sword sect. As such, Li Ke naturally had no reason to refuse. When he heard Li Ke's words, Lin Qing smiled faintly. Lin Gang, who was fighting fiercely with Zhou Song, frowned slightly. He also felt that something was wrong. This Li Ke did not seem to be here to help him. Then what was he doing here? Moreover, who was the person beside him? Just as Lin Gang was feeling puzzled, Lin Qing laughed coldly and said, "Make your move." The moment he said that, an End Realm aura exploded from Lin Qing's body. Feeling this aura, Lin Gang's expression changed and he couldn't help but exclaim, "End Realm cultivation." He didn't expect Lin Qing to be an End Realm expert. However, it was already too late for him to be surprised because Lin Qing had already charged towards Ying. Lin Gang didn't recognize Lin Qing, but Ying did. After all, Lin Qing and Ying could be said to be senior and junior brothers. However, after Lin Qing left the sword sect, Ying became the vice sect leader of the sword sect. Seeing Lin Qing appear, Ying's face flashed with shock. "Lin Qing, that's right, I'm back in the sword sect." "Ying, I said before that you're a naturally rebellious person. Now, it seems like I was right. Facing Ying, Lin Qing sneered coldly. Then, he joined forces with Song Xing to attack Ying. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1966. Lin Qing sneered as he looked at Ying. Hearing this, the chill in Ying's eyes intensified. At the same time, a thought of retreating emerged in his heart. He had no choice. If he was facing Song Xing alone, he would not be afraid at all. This was because Song Xing alone could not do anything to him. Although he could not do anything to Song Xing either, at least his life was not in danger. However, if Lin Qing joined in and the two of them attacked him together, then the situation would be completely different. Lin Qing and Song Xing, the two of them together, were completely capable of killing him. Lin Qing was no stranger to Ying. Keenly sensing the change in Ying's expression, Lin Qing did not say anything and directly blocked off Ying's escape route. Then, he joined forces with Song Xing to attack Ying. With a thick sneer on his face, Lin Qing said indifferently, "Ying, I know your human form too well. You want to run, right? But I'm afraid you won't have the chance today." Lin Qing could tell at a glance that Ying was thinking of retreating. Naturally, he would not give Ying the chance to escape. Hence, without saying anything, he blocked off Ying's escape route. When he saw Lin Qing's actions, the chill in Ying's eyes intensified. Lin Qing clearly wanted to kill him right here and now. With the addition of Lin Qing, the pressure on Ying naturally increased by a lot. Although Ying could still hold on for the time being, it was obvious that Ying would not be able to hold on for much longer if the situation continued on like this. Just like Ying, after Lin Qing made his move, Li Ku also immediately attacked Lin Gang. Without any explanation, he joined forces with Zhou Song to deal with Lin Gang. Although Zhou Song did not know about the relationship between Li Ku and Lin Qing, he naturally would not reject Li Ku's offer to help. After all, it was indeed difficult for Zhou Song to take down Lin Gang alone. Now that Li Ku was helping him, Zhou Song saw hope in killing Lin Gang. Zhou Song's confidence was boosted, but Lin Gang was completely different. While facing the combined attacks of Zhou Song and Li Ku, he glared at Li Ku and shouted, "Li Ku, what are you doing? Are you crazy?" Li Ku was supposed to be his ally, but now he was helping Zhou Song to deal with him. This made Lin Gang extremely depressed. In response to Lin Gang's angry shout, Li Ku was extremely calm. "Lin Gang, I have decided to join the Sword Sect. If you know what's good for you, you'd better surrender now. Sect's leader, perhaps the sect leader will spare your life." Li Ku, and chose to join the Sword Sect? Upon hearing these words, Lin Gang was taken aback. However, he quickly became enraged as he shouted, "You traitor!" Lin Gang didn't expect that Li Ku would change sides at the last minute. If that was the case, wouldn't their plan to attack the Sword Gate fail? Not to mention the possibility of failure, it was already extremely difficult for Lin Gang to escape, because Zhou Song and Li Ku were both entangled with him, giving him no chance to escape. Hearing that Li Ku had joined the Sword Sect, Zhou Song's lips curled into a smile. He vaguely guessed that this was Lin Qing's doing. Not bad, not bad. The Sword Sect now has another End-Realm expert. He did not doubt Li Ku's words. Li Ku and Lin Gang were clearly not holding back at all. Li Ku really wanted to kill Lin Gang. Just like Lin Qing said, this was Li Ku's proof of joining the Sword Sect. With Li Ku's help, Zhou Song's confidence was greatly boosted. He thought that no matter what, he had to kill Lin Gang here today. Thinking of this, Zhou Song's attacks became even more ferocious. With the addition of Li Ku and Lin Qing, the situation was completely reversed. Originally, Ying and Lin Gang were evenly matched against Song Xing and Zhou Song. But now, with the arrival of Lin Qing and Li Ku, the balance was completely broken. Lin Gang and Ying were not afraid of one-on-one. But one against two, the situation was completely different. Moreover, Lin Qing and Li Ku's strength was not weaker than Lin Gang and Ying's. All of a sudden, the situation was completely reversed. Lin Gang and Ying were completely suppressed. As a result, the morale of the Swords Gate's side naturally rose. As for the Bloodblade Valley side, their morale was clearly much weaker. There was nothing they could do. Looking at Lin Gang and Ying, they were completely suppressed and could only bitterly hold on. Even their own sect leader was in such a state. How could the people below have any fighting spirit? Xiaochen was still engaged in a fierce battle with the elder of the Bloodblade Valley. However, the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Lin Qing and Li Ke's appearance made Xiaochen unconsciously happy. It seemed that he would definitely win today. Moreover, Lin Gang and Ying also had a very high chance of killing the two of them. Of course, what made Xiaochen the happiest wasn't this. Xiaochen had heard the conversation between Lin Qing and Li Ke. It was obvious that Li Ke had chosen to join the Sword Sect. What made Xiaochen happy was that Li Ke had joined. He was an End Realm expert. With him joining the Sword Sect, there was no doubt that the strength of the Sword Sect would increase by a lot. As a result, the Sword Sect had 5 End Realm experts. Even compared to the Black Emperor Sect, they weren't any weaker. After all, the Black Emperor Sect also only had 5 End Realm experts. Moreover, the Sword Sect had 8 Dao Realm experts, which were sword heads. They had even more than the Black Emperor Sect. They completely had the ability to charge into the top powers. This was naturally what Xiaochen was happy about. Of course, Xiaochen didn't know that Li Ke joining the Sword Sect wasn't just a small benefit. Apart from Li Ke himself being an End Realm expert, the entire Sky Sword Sect also joined the Sword Sect. Even Wuzhou, which was controlled by the Sky Sword Sect, would belong to the Sword Sect from today onwards. With Wuzhou, the Sword Sect would be able to dominate 2 states. With that, they would be able to obtain more resources. The more resources they had, the better it would be for the development of a sect. There was no doubt about that. One could say that Lin Qing being able to persuade Li Ke to join the Sword Sect was a huge contribution. It played a huge role in the growth of the Sword Sect's strength. Xiaochen was delighted. However, the elder who was fighting against Xiaochen had an ashen face. It was like he could already see the destruction of Bloodblade Valley. After all, Lin Gang and Ying were surrounded. Looking at the current situation, it was only a matter of time before they lost. Once Lin Qing, Zhou Song, Sang Xing, and Li Ke were free, it would be a disaster for the people of Bloodblade Valley. Who would be able to block 4 End Realm experts? Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1967. Lin Gang and Ying were currently facing the combined attacks of Sang Xing, Zhou Song, Lin Qing, and Li Ke, 4 End Realm experts. If this continued, Lin Gang and Ying's defeat was almost certain. 2 against 1, this advantage was already incomparably huge. The battle continued, and Xiaochen relied on the power of the Sword Realm to gradually suppress the Bloodblade Valley Elder in front of him. Being suppressed by Xiaochen, although the Elder tried his best to resist, he was still unable to change anything. He tried his best to resist Xiaochen's attacks, but Xiaochen's attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer. The Elder's injuries were getting worse and worse, and it seemed like he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Such a battle naturally wouldn't end in a short period of time. Thus, for an entire day and night, the Sword Province could feel the aftermath of the battle between the Sword Sect and the Bloodblade Valley, as well as the Demon-Slaying Sect. After fighting intensely for an entire day and night, Xiaochen relied on the position of the Sword Realm to finally kill this Bloodblade Valley Elder. In a one-on-one battle, and in a situation where his cultivation was lower, Xiaochen was able to kill a Comprehension Realm expert. This was indeed not easy. At the same time, it also displayed Xiaochen's heaven-defying combat strength against those of the same realm. From the overall situation, Xiaochen killing an elder of the Bloodblade Valley didn't have much of an effect. However, Xiaochen was able to kill a Comprehension Realm expert, which indeed made Xiaochen very happy. This was because this was the first time Xiaochen had killed a Comprehension Realm expert. However, after killing this Bloodblade Valley Elder, Xiaochen had expended a lot of energy and didn't choose to continue attacking. In fact, at this point in the battle, it wasn't important whether Xiao Chen attacked or not. The outcome of the battle was basically determined. Other than Lin Gang and Ying, who were still stubbornly resisting, the other experts of the Bloodblade Valley were either dead or injured. They were completely suppressed by the Sword Sect. The experts of the Sword Sect led by Yang Song and the others had completely suppressed the Bloodblade Valley. At the same time, the Vice Valley Master of the Bloodblade Valley, a Dao Realm expert, had also been killed by Yang Song. As the experts of the Bloodblade Valley fell one after another, the outcome was set. Only Lin Gang and Ying were left. However, even for Lin Gang and Ying, after a day and night of intense battle, they were also facing the combined attacks of 4 End Realm experts. Their situation was already extremely bad. With such a situation, even as an End Realm expert with thick life energy, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. It was obviously impossible to kill an End Realm expert in one strike. One could only slowly wear them down and use up their life energy. Only then would one have a chance to kill an End Realm expert. Lin Gang and Ying were in such a situation. The life energy in their bodies was constantly being used up. Once their life energy was used up, their outcome was obvious. They could also feel that the two of them were reaching their limits. As such, Sang Xing, Zhou Song, Lin Qing, and Li Ke didn't waste this opportunity. Their attacks became more and more ferocious. They couldn't hold on and couldn't find a way to escape. Last time, Ying was able to escape from the Sword Sect because he had a space compass on him. Unfortunately, that space compass had been used up. Ying didn't have a second space compass on him. Without a space compass, it was almost impossible to escape from Sang Xing's hands. Furthermore, Sang Xing had already suffered once. How could he give Ying such a chance again? As such, Sang Xing had been blocking Ying's path of retreat, not giving Ying any chance to escape. This made Ying extremely angry. While blocking Sang Xing and Lin Qing's attacks, Ying shouted coldly, "Sang Xing, are you really going to be so ruthless? No matter what, you and I were comrades in the past. Do you really have to kill me?" "Humph, comrades? Ying, you are just a traitor of the Sword Sect." "What comrades? Today, you will die." Facing Ying's angry shout, Sang Xing didn't care at all. In the past, Sang Xing did not think that he and Ying had any feelings for each other. Not to mention that Ying had already betrayed the Sword Sect. Even in the past, when the two of them were still vice sect leaders of the Sword Sect, Sang Xing and Ying could be described as fire and water. At that time, Ying was bent on becoming the sect leader of the Sword Sect. Sang Xing felt that the position of sect leader of the Sword Sect could only be taken by the successor of the heaven-breaking Sword Sage. Therefore, the two of them were fighting openly and secretly. Neither of them was willing to back down. Their relationship had never been harmonious. Therefore, it was impossible for Ying to use their friendship to move Sang Xing. Seeing that Sang Xing had no intention of holding back, and the murderous intent in his eyes grew stronger as time passed, Ying gritted his teeth. His heart was filled with unwillingness, but his body was almost at its limit. Ying felt powerless. Not giving Ying any time to catch his breath, Sang Xing and Lin Qing tightly entangled Ying, each wave of attacks stronger than the last. Just as Ying found it increasingly difficult to defend against Sang Xing and Lin Qing's attacks, on the other side, Lin Gang suddenly let out a scream. Zhou Song's fist landed on Lin Gang's chest. A terrifying wave of spiritual energy instantly exploded and entered Lin Gang's body, breaking his heart. Just like Ying, Lin Gang had also reached his limit. Zhou Song accurately took advantage of Lin Gang's momentary lapse in concentration and immediately lashed out with a punch, before he viciously punched Lin Gang's chest. If it were anyone else, they would have died on the spot. However, Lin Gang was an End Realm expert after all. After his heart was broken, he didn't die on the spot. However, he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Then, his aura instantly weakened. His face was pale and his aura was weak. Lin Gang looked at Zhou Song in front of him. A deep sense of unwillingness flashed across his eyes. He didn't expect that he would die here. Just a day ago, Lin Gang was still full of confidence that he would be able to take down the sword sect. However, in just a short day, Lin Gang was about to die in Jianzhou. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something. However, before he could speak, a long sword pierced through his throat from behind. Li Ke had appeared behind Lin Gang out of nowhere, stabbing his sword into Lin Gang's throat. Lin Gang wanted to say something, but because his throat was pierced, he couldn't say a single word. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1968. Lin Gang died. First, his heart was shattered by Zhou Song's fist. Then, his throat was pierced by Li Ke's sword. Before he died, Lin Gang turned his head and looked at Li Ke unwillingly. Maybe he didn't expect that he would be killed immediately. Originally, Li Ke was supposed to be his ally, but he was persuaded by Lin Qing and turned to the Sword Gate. It was also because of this that the Blood Saber Valley had failed and he had died. There was no doubt that Lin Gang knew what his death meant to the Blood Knife Valley. Perhaps it would not be long before the Blood Knife Valley was removed from the Great Thousand World. From then on, the Blood Knife Valley would cease to exist in the Great Thousand World. He didn't dare to, but he had no choice. Lin Gang's consciousness became more and more blurry. In the end, his life was cut off, and he died unwillingly. One could easily imagine the impact of Lin Gang's death on the Bloodblade Valley. Upon seeing this scene, the Bloodblade Valley members, who were still stubbornly resisting, completely lost their will to fight. There were even some who began to secretly flee. The defeat was like a landslide. As the Bloodblade Valley members fled, the Sword Sect members chased them down. With that, the Bloodblade Valley, which was already on the verge of defeat, was completely defeated. Lin Gang's death was the last straw that broke the Bloodblade Valley's back. They no longer had the strength to fight the Sword Sect. Probably not many of the Bloodblade Valley experts present would be able to escape. Looking at the scene in front of him, he knew that it was over. The Bloodblade Valley was finished, and so was he. This was because after killing Lin Gang, Zhou Song and Li Ke arrived in front of Ying. The four End Realm experts blocked off all of Ying's paths of retreat. Ying had no way out and was already at his limit. Now that he was facing four End Realm experts, he didn't have any chance at all. A self-mocking smile appeared on his face. Ying also gave up on resisting. His gaze swept across Zhou Song and the others before landing on Sangxing. He said in a low voice, "Since things have already reached this stage, the winner takes all. I have nothing to say." Facing four End Realm experts at the same time, he naturally knew the outcome, which was why there was no need to continue fighting. Hearing this, Sangxing didn't reply. He just looked at Ying indifferently. Under the gazes of Sangxing and the other three, Ying turned his gaze to Xiao Chen. A strange glint flashed in his eyes as he shouted, "Xiao Chen, I do admire you for allowing the Sword Sect to grow to such an extent in such a short period of time. However, I, Ying, still do not recognize you as the sect master because you don't have the right." Without waiting for Xiao Chen's reply, Ying secretly circulated the spiritual energy in his body and forcefully severed his 8 extraordinary meridians. After spitting out a mouthful of fresh blood, Ying's face turned pale. Then, his entire body fell straight to the ground. Even though he knew that he had no chance, Ying wasn't willing to be captured alive. Since he had already betrayed the Sword Sect, now that Bloodblade Valley was defeated and Lin Gang was killed, there was only one outcome for him, which was death. Rather than dying in the hands of Xiao Chen, why not kill himself? That way, Ying could still keep his last bit of dignity. Seeing Ying kill himself, Xiao Chen also came to Sangxing's side. He looked calmly at Ying's corpse. Xiao Chen's face didn't show much emotion. Although Ying didn't admit that he was the sect master, this wasn't important to Xiao Chen. Whether Ying admitted it or not, it didn't matter. Ying died, but Xiao Chen didn't feel any joy or sadness. He didn't feel happy because he killed this traitor, nor did he feel pity because Ying was an End Realm expert. Since they were not on the same side, it was naturally impossible for them to walk together. Therefore, Xiaochen did not feel anything special about Ying's death. At most, he just sighed inwardly. After all, Ying was once the deputy lord of the Sword Gate. That was all. Looking deeply at Ying, Xiaochen said to Cang Xing and Zhou Song, "I'll leave the rest to you guys." "Yes." Hearing this, Cang Xing and Zhou Song respectfully nodded. Since the Bloodblade Valley was defeated, Xiaochen left the rest at Cang Xing and Zhou Song. Then, Xiaochen turned to look at Li Ku. In terms of cultivation, Li Ku definitely wouldn't place Xiaochen in his eyes. However, facing Xiaochen's gaze, for some reason, Li Ku couldn't help but feel nervous. Maybe this was Xiaochen's identity. After all, although Xiaochen was only at the Enlightenment realm, in terms of identity, Xiaochen was the sect master of the Sword Sect. He wasn't someone Li Ku could offend. Hence, out of instinct, Li Ku took the initiative to bow to Xiaochen. Li Ku greets sect master. As an End Realm expert, Li Ku actually took the initiative to bow to Xiaochen. What Li Ku didn't expect was that he didn't seem to have any resistance to bowing to Xiaochen. This was the benefit of his identity. Facing Li Ku's bow, Xiaochen didn't act arrogant at all. He personally helped Li Ku up. Xiaochen smiled and said, "Senior Li Ku, there's no need to be so polite." Although Li Ku joined the Sword Sect, he was still an End Realm expert. Hence, Xiaochen still gave him face. Facing Xiaochen's warmth, Li Ku finally heaved a sigh of relief. Before, he was really afraid that Xiaochen wouldn't accept him. One must know that even the Bloodblade Valley was destroyed. With the strength of the Sword Sect, it wouldn't be too difficult for them to destroy the Sky Sword Sect. In fact, it would be very simple. However, from the looks of it, Xiaochen obviously didn't have such thoughts. After helping Li Ku up, Xiaochen and the other two stood in the air. Then, Lin Qing roughly explained the situation to Xiaochen. After hearing that Li Ku had decided to lead the Sky Sword Sect to join the Sword Sect, Xiaochen smiled and said to Li Ku, "Senior Li Ku, I believe that you won't regret your decision today. The Sword Sect welcomes you." Xiaochen didn't hesitate to agree to Li Ku and the rest of the Sky Sword Sect joining. After all, only a fool would reject such a thing. Besides, Li Ku had shown enough sincerity by killing Lin Gang himself. Just as Lin Qing said, Li Ku had shown his sincerity to Xiaochen and proved his sincerity. So, Xiaochen naturally would not refuse. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Li Ku once again cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, sect leader." Okay, let's go back first. We'll leave the rest to Senior Cang Xing and second Senior Brother. There shouldn't be any problems. After all, there's only the deceased demon sect left. They won't be able to do much. Hearing this, Xiaochen laughed out loud. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1969. The Sky Sword Sect had surrendered and the Bloodblade Valley had been destroyed. Now, the three sects had joined forces to attack the Sword Sect. Only the deceased demon sect was left holding on bitterly. With the deceased demon sect's strength, they naturally didn't pose much of a threat to the Sword Sect. After all, the deceased demon sect only had one End Realm expert, the Blood Demon Old Man. Compared to the Sword Sect, the deceased demon sect was too weak. The following matters would be handled by Cang Xing and Zhou Song. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Lin Qing and Li Ku didn't have any objections. Then, the group directly returned to the Sword Sect. The matter of the Sky Sword Sect's surrender was handled by Lin Qing and Li Ku, so there was nothing to worry about. Of course, they still had to take over Wuzhou. After all, since the Sky Sword Sect had surrendered, then Wuzhou would naturally be under the influence of the Sword Sect. Xiaochen returned to the Sword Sect. As for the deceased demon sect, after a day and night of battle, the deceased demon sect had suffered heavy casualties. The Blood Demon Old Man and Wu Huan had also fought fiercely for an entire day. After a day of battle, the Blood Demon Old Man was extremely confused. It had been so long, but why was there still no news from the Bloodblade Valley and the Sky Sword Sect? His heart was filled with doubts, but because the Blood Demon Old Man only had one End Realm expert, Wu Huan, in front of him, he could still hold on. To put it bluntly, Wu Huan's strength was actually on par with the Blood Demon Old Man. The two of them couldn't do anything to each other. In a one-on-one situation, whether it was Wu Huan or the Blood Demon Old Man, it wouldn't be an easy task to kill the other. The two of them had expended a lot of energy. However, at this moment, Song Xing and Zhou Song finally brought people over. After dealing with the Bloodblade Valley matter, Song Xing and Zhou Song brought a portion of the Sword Sect experts over. Seeing the two of them appear, the Blood Demon Old Man's expression instantly changed. Wu Huan, on the other hand, revealed a relieved smile. "If you guys didn't come, I would have died from exhaustion." Looking at Song Xing and Zhou Song, Wu Huan said with a smile. After fighting one-on-one with the Blood Demon Old Man for more than a day, Wu Huan was indeed exhausted. Fortunately, Song Xing and Zhou Song had finally arrived. Song Xing and Zhou Song led the Sword Sect experts. At the thought of this, the Blood Demon Old Man was extremely furious. At the same time, he was also extremely puzzled. One must know that the Sword Gate had no advantage against the three great sections. How could they have defeated the Bloodblade Valley and the Heavenly Sword Sect? The Blood Demon Old Man naturally didn't know that Li Ku and the Sky Sword Sect had already surrendered to the Sword Sect. He didn't care about the ugly expression on his face. Song Xing and Zhou Song came to Wu Huan's side. Zhou Song smiled and said, "Look at you. Aren't you still full of energy? Cut the crap. How's the Blood Demon Old Man?" Wu Huan replied snappily. "It's already settled. Only the deceased demon sect is left," Zhou Song said. The Blood Demon sect and the Sky Sword sect had already been settled. Now, only the deceased demon sect was still bitterly holding on. Hearing Zhou Song's words, Wu Huan sneered. "Then let's do it. Let's settle the matter here as soon as possible." Only the deceased devil sect was left struggling to hold on. With this, the outcome was set. Following Wu Huan's words, Zhou Song and Song Xing attacked at the same time, attacking the Blood Demon Old Man. At the same time, the experts of the Sword Gate who came with Song Xing and Zhou Song also attacked the people of the deceased devil sect. With Zhou Song, Song Xing, and the experts of the Sword Sect joining in, the situation was completely reversed. Just the deceased demon sect alone couldn't stop the Sword Sect. Especially the Blood Demon Old Man. He had already fought with Wu Huan for more than a day. Now, he had to face the combined attacks of three End Realm experts. Very quickly, the Blood Demon Old Man was heavily injured by Zhou Song. Fighting one against three, it could only be said that the Blood Demon Old Man was struggling at death's door. It was only a matter of time before he lost. While resisting with all his might, the Blood Demon Old Man complained in his heart. At the same time, he had a deep suspicion. He really couldn't understand why the Bloodblade Valley and the Sky Sword sect would lose. This was completely different from what he had expected. One must know that when the three sects joined forces, they had made a detailed plan. It shouldn't have been like this. It was impossible for him to be a match for Song Xing and the others. The injuries on his body became more and more serious. After a fierce battle, the Blood Demon Old Man finally couldn't take it anymore and begged for mercy. This old man surrenders. The Blood Demon Old Man knew that he wasn't a match for the three of them. Moreover, the deceased demon sect had suffered heavy casualties under the massacre of the experts of the Sword Sect. Therefore, the Blood Demon Old Man chose to surrender. Unfortunately, after hearing the Blood Demon Old Man's words, Song Xing and the others didn't have any intention of stopping. Wu Huan even sneered. "Surrender? Do you think that's possible now? Blood Demon Old Man, today is the day you fall." The Blood Demon Old Man was different from Li Ku. Therefore, in the face of his surrender, Wu Huan and the others naturally wouldn't agree. This old man would never sincerely surrender to the Sword Sect. Therefore, it was better to kill him. Wu Huan and the others attacked even more fiercely. In the end, even though the Blood Demon Old Man was extremely unwilling, he was still killed by Wu Huan and the others. With the fall of the blood demon old man, the experts of the deceased demons sect naturally lost their fighting spirit. What followed was another merciless massacre. At this point, the plan of the three sects to join forces to attack the Sword Sect was completely destroyed. The Sword Sect could also be said to have completely defeated the three sections. They had successfully resolved this crisis. This outcome was something that many forces in the Great Thousand World didn't expect. Originally, when the three sects joined forces to attack the Sword Sect, many forces in the Great Thousand World felt that the Sword Sect would definitely be in danger this time. However, who would have thought that the Sword Sect would actually win in the end? Moreover, it was a complete victory. In one fell swoop, they destroyed the attack of the three sections. The combat strength that the Sword Sect displayed in this battle shocked many forces in the Great Thousand World. At the same time, they probably had to reevaluate the overall strength of the Sword Sect. The Sword Sect's strength was getting stronger and stronger. Regarding this, the Black Emperor sect was undoubtedly the most unwilling to see this happen. In this battle, the Black Emperor sect specially sent spies to the Sword Sect. Now, following the complete victory of the Sword Sect, a few of the spies from the Black Emperor sect sighed helplessly as they passed the news back to the Black Emperor sect. The Sword Sect's threat is getting bigger and bigger. If Sect Master still wants to attack the Sword Sect, I'm afraid it won't be an easy task. Yes, I didn't expect that even Li Ku would surrender to the Sword Sect. There's also that Lin Qing, 6 End Realm experts. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1970. The few spies of the Black Emperor sect gathered together and sighed helplessly. One must know that the Sword Sect and the Basho were right next to each other. The stronger the Sword Sect was, the more pressure the Black Emperor sect would face. Moreover, the Black Emperor sect had never given up on swallowing the Sword Sect. However, it seemed like it would be difficult for them to take down the Sword Sect. That's right, 6 End Realm experts, 8 Dao Realm experts. Along with the surrender of the Sky Sword Sect, the number of sword heads in the Sword Sect can probably exceed 10. The current Sword Sect already has the strength of a top power. The leading Black Emperor sect elder sighed helplessly. 6 Dao Realm experts and 10 Dao Realm experts. In terms of strength, the current Swords Gate was already on par with the Black Emperor sect. In fact, in terms of Dao Realm experts, the Swords Gate even surpassed the Black Emperor sect. In this way, if the Black Emperor sect wanted to take down the Swords Gate, it would no longer be a matter of how much they had to pay. It was basically impossible, because the Swords Gate already had the strength to not fear the Black Emperor sect. If the two sects were to fight again, it would be hard to say who would emerge victorious. Furthermore, with the surrender of the Heavenly Sword sect, the Sword Gate had also obtained the land of the Wu state. In this way, the Sword Gate was equivalent to dominating the land of 2 states, and the various resources they could obtain would be at least twice as much as before. The few Black Emperor sect spies were shocked. On the other side, within the Basho, Black Emperor sect main hall, He Sui sat on the main seat. Below him were Zhao Chenfeng and the other higher-ups. Pretty much all the higher-ups of the Black Emperor sect were gathered together. However, at this moment, their expressions weren't too good. After keeping silent for a moment, He Sui was the first to speak. The Sword Sect obtained a huge victory, the Sky Sword Sect surrendered, and Lin Qing also joined the Sword Sect. In a short 10 years, the Sword Sect isn't what it used to be. The current Sword Gate already has 6 End Realm experts and 10 Sword Head level Dao Realm experts. Their strength isn't weaker than our Black Emperor sect. As he spoke, anger and helplessness surfaced in He Sui's heart. Thinking about it, it made sense. He was clearly a piece of fat meat at the edge of his mouth, but in the blink of an eye, he actually had the strength to contend against the Black Emperor sect. This made He Sui somewhat unable to accept it for a moment. Hearing He Sui's words, the upper echelons of the Black Emperor sect below were also extremely furious. However, at the same time, they were extremely helpless because all of this had already become a fact, and the Black Emperor sect could not change it. Everyone went silent. Seeing this, He Sui sighed and said, "Now, it's already impossible to take down the Sword Sect, and the Sword Sect might become the sixth great power. What do all of you think our Black Emperor sect should do to the Sword Sect?" With the strength of the Sword Sect, the neighboring Black Emperor sect naturally had to change their attitude towards the Sword Sect. After all, the two sects were very close to each other, so it was time for this relationship to change. Hearing Yi Sui's words, Zhao Qinfeng and the other three Black Emperor sect princes knew what Yi Sui wanted to say. Actually, when he received the news, Yi Sui already had an answer in his heart. The Sword Sect had become really strong, and Yi Sui also knew that the best choice for the Black Emperor sect was to change their attitude and coexist peacefully with the Sword Sect. If not, it wouldn't be good for anyone. He sighed in his heart. The foundations of the Sword Sect were indeed shocking. Think about it, if the Sword Sect didn't have such a deep foundation, they definitely wouldn't have been able to grow so much in such a short time. No one replied, and Yi Sui didn't speak either. After sighing in his heart, Yi Sui said helplessly, "Zhao Qinfeng, make a trip to the Sword Sect and congratulate them." Yi Sui sent one of the four Black Emperor sect princes, Tiger King Zhao Qinfeng, to personally congratulate the Sword Sect. To put it bluntly, he was telling Xiaoqian that the Black Emperor sect was willing to coexist peacefully with the Sword Sect in the future. They had completely changed their attitude towards the Sword Sect. Although Zhao Qinfeng was unwilling to do so, he knew that this was the best choice. He nodded helplessly and said in a low voice, "Yes." Being forced to change their attitude towards the Sword Sect, the higher-ups of the Black Emperor sect were helpless, but there was nothing they could do. The Black Emperor sect had no choice but to accept the fact that the Sword Sect had risen, and the other sects were the same. The strength that the Sword Sect had displayed in this battle had made many forces in the Great Thousand World look at them in a new light, especially the 5 super first-rate forces. They had already placed the Sword Sect on an equal footing. Moreover, the 5 super first-rate forces had already seen the Sword Sect as the 6th super first-rate force. This didn't mean that they thought too highly of the Sword Sect, but the Sword Sect's strength had indeed entered the level of a super first-rate force. They believed that it wouldn't be long before the Sword Sect became the 6th super first-rate force in the Great Thousand World. Xiaoqian didn't care too much about the thoughts of the other sections. After the battle, Xiaoqian immediately made arrangements for everyone in the Sky Sword sect. Of course, for those disciples who didn't meet the requirements, Xiaoqian only made them odd-job disciples in the Sword sect. After all, if the Sword sect wanted to develop, it naturally couldn't be without a bottom line. Xiaoqian couldn't make those who weren't talented enough official disciples in the Sword sect. He could only make them odd-job disciples, and this was because of Li Ku. After making arrangements for everyone in the Sky Sword sect, Xiaoqian appointed Li Ku as the deputy sect master of the Sword sect. The previous 2 Dao Realm deputy sect masters of the Sword sect were the sword heads of the Sword sect. Just as Lin Qing had said, Xiaoqian didn't treat Li Ku unfairly, and this made Li Ku feel touched. 6 deputy sect masters and 10 sword heads. This was the current strength of the Sword sect, and it wasn't any weaker than the Black Emperor sect. At the same time, as the Sword sect revealed its strength, in half a month, the Sword sect once again announced that the Sword sect had been promoted to a super first-rate force, becoming the 6th super first-rate force in the Great Thousand World. No one in the Great Thousand World objected to the Sword sect's promotion because the Sword sect indeed had the strength to do so. Not only did the ordinary forces not object, but even the Black Emperor sect and the other 5 super first-rate forces did not object at all. The Black Emperor sect and the other super first-rate forces even expressed their congratulations to the Swords Gate for becoming a super first-rate force. They even sent people to congratulate the Swords Gate. The Black Emperor sect's Zhao Qinfeng represented the Black Emperor sect to pay a visit to the Swords Gate. This was undoubtedly to let everyone know that the Swords Gate's promotion to a super first-rate force was already set in stone. Even the Black Emperor sect didn't have the slightest objection. At the foot of the Sword sect, Zhao Qinfeng and several experts from the Black Emperor sect walked slowly. They didn't fly directly to the Sword sect but chose to walk up. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1971. In the past, no matter who came to the sword sect, they would definitely fly directly to the sword sect. It was impossible for them to walk up from the foot of the mountain. Even ordinary elders of the Black Emperor sect wouldn't do that. However, this time, Zhao Qinfeng brought the people of the Black Emperor sect all the way to the foot of the sword sect. As one of the 4 great princes of the Black Emperor sect and a true in-realm expert, Zhao Qinfeng had obediently paid a visit. This was enough to prove that the Black Emperor sect's attitude towards the sword sect had changed. Although the experts of the Black Emperor sect who followed behind Zhao Qinfeng felt uncomfortable in their hearts, they didn't dare complain in the slightest. They weren't stupid. They knew that the sword sect was no longer the sword sect of the past. If they still dared to fly directly above the sword sect, there was no doubt that the experts of the sword sect would immediately kill them. One must know that the current sword sect didn't fear the Black Emperor sect at all. Moreover, even if the experts of the sword sect killed them, the Black Emperor sect wouldn't start a war with the sword sect. Therefore, when it was time to be honest, it was better to be honest. They arrived at the entrance of the sword sect. At this moment, there were 4 disciples guarding the entrance. When they saw Zhao Qinfeng bringing people over, the 4 disciples immediately blocked their path. Zhao Qinfeng didn't make things difficult for them and said indifferently, "Black Emperor sect's Tiger King Zhao Qinfeng is here to pay his respects to sect leader Xiao Chen." Hearing Zhao Qinfeng's words, the 4 disciples were first stunned. However, they quickly revealed a nervous expression. At the same time, they respectfully said to Zhao Qinfeng, "Greetings, Tiger King." Although Zhao Qinfeng appeared polite, how could the 4 disciples resist the pressure that Zhao Qinfeng unconsciously emitted? Not to mention, Zhao Qinfeng's identity was enough for these disciples to look up to. Therefore, after knowing Zhao Qinfeng's identity, the 4 disciples respectfully bowed. Their attitude was simply respectful to the extreme. Zhao Qinfeng's visit was quickly reported by someone. After that, Zhang Xing personally came to welcome Zhao Qinfeng. At the mountain gate, Zhang Xing appeared in front of Zhao Qinfeng in a mere 100 breaths of time. Following the appearance of Zhang Xing, the 4 sword sect disciples secretly heaved a sigh of relief. There was nothing they could do about it. Previously, when they faced Zhao Qinfeng, the 4 disciples almost felt suffocated. Now that Zhang Xing had appeared, the 4 of them were greatly relieved. He bowed respectfully to Zhang Xing and said, "Greetings, Deputy Sect Master." Facing the 4 people's greetings, Zhang Xing nodded slightly. At the same time, he strode in front of Zhao Qinfeng and laughed loudly, "Brother Zhao, what wind blew you here today?" Zhao Qinfeng walked up the mountain, introduced himself, and even waited here for Zhang Xing to arrive. Without a doubt, he had already given the sword sect enough face. As such, Zhang Xing naturally wouldn't offend Zhao Qinfeng for no reason. Since the other party had given him face, Zhang Xing naturally had to treat him warmly. Zhang Xing took the initiative to smile and said enthusiastically. After saying that, Zhang Xing turned his head to look at the 4 disciples and said, "You guys are simply ridiculous. Don't you know etiquette when the Tiger King arrives? You actually made the Tiger King wait outside the mountain gate." The 4 disciples were indeed scared out of their wits, so they didn't care about being rude at all. Now that they were scolded by Zhang Xing, the 4 of them lowered their heads and didn't dare to speak. Of course, Zhang Xing's scolding was just for show for Zhao Qinfeng. After all, it was indeed a little inappropriate to leave Zhao Qinfeng outside the mountain gate. In fact, it could even be said that it was a little too much. Zhang Xing's scolding was also considered giving face to Zhao Qinfeng. Regarding this, Zhao Qinfeng also smiled and said, "Zhang Xing, don't scold them. It's just a small matter, don't take it to heart." Zhao Qinfeng took the initiative to speak up for the 4 disciples. Hearing this, Zhang Xing also rode his donkey down the slope and replied with a smile. "Brother Zhao, please forgive me. It's my sword sect's fault for not disciplining them properly. Come, let's not talk about this anymore. It's rare for Brother Zhao to come here. Today, you and I must not return until we're drunk. Speaking of which, we haven't drunk together for 100 years. Song Xing and Zhao Qinfeng knew each other before. There was nothing strange about this. Moreover, the two of them had a good relationship before. However, with the decline of the Sword Sect, the Black Emperor sect wanted to annex the Sword Sect. As a result, the two of them gradually lost contact with each other. Now, because of the rise of the Sword Sect, the Black Emperor sect knew that it was impossible to annex the Sword Sect. The best way was to get along well with each other. As a result, Song Xing and Zhao Qinfeng had another chance to drink together. Song Xing personally brought Zhao Qinfeng into the Sword Sect. After settling down the experts of the Black Emperor sect behind Zhao Qinfeng, Song Xing pulled Zhao Qinfeng to his cave to drink. In Song Xing's cave, Zhao Qinfeng and Lin Qing were sitting in a pavilion in the courtyard. They personally poured a cup of wine for Zhao Qinfeng. Song Xing said with a smile, "Brother Zhao, let me introduce you. This is Brother Lin, Lin Qing. Like me, he is also one of the vice sect masters of the Sword Sect." Lin Qing and Zhao Qinfeng had met before, but they weren't familiar with each other. Therefore, Song Xing only gave a simple introduction. Hearing this, Zhao Qinfeng smiled and took the initiative to greet him. "So it's Brother Lin. Brother Zhao, there's no need to be so courteous. I've long heard of the Tiger King's fame. It's my honor to meet you today. Cheers." Hearing Zhao Qinfeng's words, Lin Qing smiled and raised his cup, draining it in one gulp. Song Xing and Lin Qing warmly welcomed Zhao Qinfeng. However, from the beginning to the end, Xiao Qin didn't show up. Not showing up didn't mean that Xiao Qin didn't know that Zhao Qinfeng was coming. Rather, Xiao Qin didn't plan to meet Zhao Qinfeng immediately. After all, the strength of the Sword Sect was extraordinary. As the sect master, no matter what Xiao Qin did, he had to consider the Sword Sect. It could even be said that Xiao Qian's every action represented the entire Sword Sect. As a result, many things couldn't be handled as simply as before. Take Zhao Qinfeng's matter for example. As one of the four great princes of the Black Emperor sect, although his status was high, it was only on par with Song Xing and the other vice sect masters. Since Xiao Qin was the sect master of the Sword Sect, how could Xiao Qin immediately appear to welcome Zhao Qinfeng? Think about it, if Zhao Qinfeng had just appeared in the Sword Sect and Xiao Qin had personally come out to welcome him, what would the world think of this? As the sect master of the Sword Sect, he actually immediately went to welcome a prince. Didn't this mean that the Sword Sect was still afraid of the Black Emperor sect? After all, in terms of status, Song Xing was a level lower than Xiao Qin. Of course, if the sect master of the Black Emperor sect, He Sui, personally came, then Xiao Qin would definitely personally welcome him. After all, the two of them had equal status. Moreover, if He Sui personally came, Xiao Qin still had Song Xing personally come out to welcome him. To put it bluntly, this was not giving the Black Emperor sect any face. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1972. Xiao Qin didn't show up immediately. It wasn't because he was putting on airs or anything, but because the Sword Sect wanted to express their attitude towards the Black Emperor sect. In the cave, Xiao Qin was cultivating alone. Tomorrow, Xiao Qin would go back to see Zhao Qinfeng. Tonight, he would let Song Xing and Lin Qing deal with it. Song Xing, Lin Qing, and Zhao Qinfeng drank until late at night. In the end, Zhao Qinfeng even stayed in Song Xing's cave. This could be considered giving Zhao Qinfeng face. As for why Xiao Qin didn't show up today, Zhao Qinfeng was very clear in his heart, so he didn't ask much. He understood that the relationship between the Black Emperor sect and the Sword Sect had changed. If it was said that both sides were in a state of strength before, then now, the Sword Sect and the Black Emperor sect were on equal footing. Neither side was afraid of the other. Of course, neither side wanted to start a war. As a result, both sides were on equal footing. And since they were on equal footing, then as the sect master of the Sword Sect, Xiao Qin naturally wasn't someone that Zhao Qinfeng could meet. After all, Zhao Qinfeng was only one of the four great princes of the Black Emperor sect. He wasn't the sect master of the Black Emperor sect. His status wasn't on the same level as Xiaochen. His mentality had already changed. He couldn't treat the sword sect with the same attitude as before. That method wouldn't work anymore. After a night of silence, around noon the next day, Xiaochen met Zhao Qinfeng in the sword sect's main hall. Sitting on the main seat, Zhao Qinfeng took the initiative to bow when he saw Xiaochen. "Greetings, Sect Master Xiaochen. Tiger King, there's no need to be so polite. Please take a seat." Hearing this, Xiaochen said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. After Zhao Qinfeng took his seat, Xiaochen said, "Tiger King, what brings you to the sword sect?" "The sword sect has been promoted to a first-rate force. This time, I am here on Sect Master Yi Sui's orders to congratulate you. At the same time, I also wish to send Sect Master Yi Sui's regards to Sect Master Xiaochen." Sect Master Yi Sui said that he hopes that the Sword Sect and the Black Emperor Sect can become friends. Hearing Xiaochen's question, Zhao Qinfeng honestly replied. Zhao Qinfeng had indeed come here to express his goodwill to the Sword Sect. He also hoped that the Sword Sect and the Black Emperor Sect could become friends in the future. After all, the two sects were so close to each other. Once they started fighting, the one who would benefit would only be the other party. It would not benefit either side at all. Moreover, the Sword Sect and the Black Emperor Sect had some enmity before. But now, the Black Emperor Sect hoped that Xiaochen would turn hostility into friendship. Zhao Qinfeng's words were very sincere. Hearing this, Sang Xing and Lin Qing, who were accompanying him, looked at each other and smiled. It seemed that after this battle, the Black Emperor Sect had completely seen the strength of the Sword Sect. They knew that the current Sword Sect could no longer be bullied by others. Just like Sang Xing and Lin Qing, a hint of a smile flashed across Xiaochen's eyes when he heard Zhao Qinfeng's words. He then smiled and said, "Sect Master Yi Sui is too kind. I'll have to trouble Tiger King to pass a message to Sect Master Yi Sui. Just say that the Sword Sect and the Black Emperor Sect will always be friends. In the future, if the Black Emperor Sect needs any help, my Sword Sect will definitely not stand by and watch." The Black Emperor Sect did not wish to have any more conflicts with the Sword Sect. Similarly, Xiaochen did not wish for the Sword Sect to have any more conflicts with the Black Emperor Sect. After all, although the current Sword Sect was not afraid of the Black Emperor Sect, if they really fought, both sects would suffer losses. This was not what Yi Sui wanted to see, nor was it what Xiaochen wanted to see. They had the same thoughts in their hearts. Therefore, Xiaochen also used this opportunity to express his attitude towards the Black Emperor Sect. Hearing Xiaochen's words, a strange look flashed across Zhao Qinfeng's eyes. Xiaochen was willing to let bygones be bygones and reconcile with the Black Emperor Sect so straightforwardly. This indeed surprised Zhao Qinfeng. At the same time, he also unconsciously looked at Xiaochen in a higher light. At such a young age, Xiaochen's Qing mansion caused Zhao Qinfeng to involuntarily exclaim in admiration. It had to be known that the reason he was able to have such an imposing manner of dismissing grudges with a smile was not because Xiaochen or the Sword Sect were easy to bully. It was completely because Xiaochen was looking at the big picture and did not want to have too much meaningless entanglement with the Black Emperor Sect. And this kind of thinking was exactly what Yi Sui had in his heart. However, Yi Sui had lived for so many years, and Xiaochen had only lived for so many years. However, in terms of mental state, Xiaochen did not seem to be much weaker than Yi Sui. At the very least, as the head of a sect, Xiaochen was very qualified. He did not make things difficult for Xiaochen in the slightest. He did not even mention anything about what had happened before, as if he had already forgotten about it. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Zhao Qinfeng immediately stood up and bowed again. "Sect Master Xiaochen, I will definitely report your words to my sect master." "Ha, that's good. Yesterday, I was unable to have a drink with the Tiger King. Today, the Tiger King must stay. You and I should have a few drinks." Hearing this, Xiaochen said with a smile. Facing Xiaochen's invitation, Zhao Qinfeng tactfully declined. "Sect master is too polite." There are still many things that I need to deal with in the Black Emperor sect, so I won't stay any longer. In the future, I will definitely have a drink with sect master. Zhao Qinfeng could naturally tell that Xiao Qin was just being polite. Facing Zhao Qinfeng's rejection, Xiao Qin did not insist and said with a smile, "Since that's the case, then I won't force you." Originally, Xiao Qin was just being polite. Since Zhao Qinfeng had rejected him, it was fine. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, Zhao Qinfeng prepared to leave with his people. Of course, before leaving, Zhao Qinfeng also took out the congratulatory gift prepared by the Black Emperor sect. He didn't even bother to look at it. Xiao Qin knew that the congratulatory gift given by the Black Emperor sect couldn't be that valuable. It was just for show. Xiao Qin was right. The congratulatory gift given by the Black Emperor sect was indeed not anything valuable. There were even many of them that Xiao Qin had given to the Black Emperor sect as compensation for the battle 10 years ago. Now, the Black Emperor sect had returned them untouched. When Zhao Qinfeng left, Sang Xing personally sent him off. As for Xiao Qin, it was obviously impossible for him to personally send Zhao Qinfeng off. Zhao Qinfeng's arrival as a representative of the Black Emperor sect meant that the relationship between the Sword sect and the Black Emperor sect would be eased for a long time. At the very least, based on the current situation, neither side wanted to start a war. This way, Xiao Qin could use most of his energy to deal with other matters, such as the matter of the Wuzhou. Although the Wuzhou had already become the territory of the Sword sect with the surrender of the Heavenly Sword sect, they had only just taken over. The Sword sect's control over the Wuzhou was actually very weak. There were even many forces within the Wuzhou that didn't listen to the Sword sect. Therefore, the matter of the Wuzhou needed to be resolved as soon as possible. Xiao Qin didn't want anything to happen in his backyard. Completely controlling the Wuzhou was the most important task of the Sword sect. They had to stabilize and control the Wuzhou in a short period of time. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1973. The matter of Wuzhou was very important to the Sword sect. After sending Zhao Qinfeng off, Xiao Qin immediately called Sang Xing, Lin Qing, and the others over. In the Great Hall, Xiao Qin looked at the people below and said, "Wuzhou has just submitted and there are many things that need to be taken care of. As such, I plan to send someone to oversee Wuzhou and try to completely subdue it in the shortest amount of time." The situation in Wuzhou was somewhat different from the Jian province. It could be said that Wuzhou was more chaotic than the Jian province. After all, the Sky Sword sect was the only first-rate faction in Wuzhou. Later on, the Bloodblade Valley forcefully intervened, causing the situation in Wuzhou to be extremely chaotic. It must be known that the Sky Sword sect's strength could only be considered to be at the bottom of the first-rate factions. As such, it was naturally very difficult for the various factions in Wuzhou to truly submit. It was unlike the Jian province, where the Sword sect had the final say. In the face of the Sword sect's orders, the various factions in the Jian province did not dare to object at all, nor did they dare to feign compliance but secretly oppose. However, Wuzhou was different. It was already very difficult for the Sky Sword sect to truly control Wuzhou. In addition, in this battle, the Sky Sword sect had surrendered to the Sword sect, causing the various factions in Wuzhou to be even more chaotic. Therefore, Xiao Qin planned to forcefully suppress the situation in Wuzhou and try to resolve the problem in the shortest amount of time. As for those factions that did not listen, they would be directly destroyed. As for those factions that were willing to submit to the Sword sect, they would naturally be given some benefits. Carrot and stick, this was Xiao Qin's method of dealing with Wuzhou. Sang Xing, Zhou Song, and the other 5 deputy sect leaders did not object to Xiao Qin's decision. Indeed, this was the fastest way to resolve Wuzhou. However, if this was to be done, there had to be an expert overseeing Wuzhou. Therefore, Xiao Qin had gathered everyone here to discuss who was more suitable to be sent to Wuzhou. Without much hesitation, Sang Xing quickly spoke up after hearing Xiao Qin's words. "Sect leader, I feel that Li Ku is the most suitable candidate. After all, he understands Wuzhou. He suggested that Li Ke go. No matter what, Li Ke had once been the leader of the Sky Sword sect. He was clearly the person who understood Wuzhou the most. For example, Li Ke had a better understanding of the situation of the various powers in Wuzhou than the others present. Thus, it would be easier for Li Ke to go and handle these matters. Hearing Song Xing's words, Xiaochen nodded slightly. Li Ke was indeed the best candidate. Xiaochen had thought of this before. Moreover, from the beginning, Xiaochen had planned to let Li Ke be in charge of Wuzhou. However, in Xiaochen's opinion, Li Ke alone might not be enough. They needed to send another person at the level of a deputy sect leader. After all, with the current situation of Wuzhou, it was hard to rely on one End Realm expert to intimidate them. Moreover, Xiaochen wanted to take over Wuzhou in a short amount of time. Thus, he naturally needed to send another person to help Li Ke. Deputy sect leader Li Ke is naturally the best choice. However, I feel that we should send 2 deputy sect leaders to intimidate them. Looking at everyone, Xiaochen opened his mouth and said. 2 deputy sect leaders were needed to suppress them. Song Xing and the others exchanged glances. Then, Lin Qing took the initiative to speak up. Since that is the case, sect leader, let me and Li Ke go. Lin Qing volunteered. Hearing that, Xiaochen nodded his head. Okay, then I'll have to trouble the 2 of you with the Wuzhou matters. Don't worry, sect leader, we won't let you down. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Lin Qing and Li Ke both cupped their hands and bowed. Sending out 2 deputy sect leaders at once. At the same time, Xiaochen was shocked. Lin Qing and Li Ke brought the experts of the sword sect and rushed to Wuzhou on the same day. As for Wuzhou, Xiaochen naturally hoped to have it firmly in his hands. After all, a state was really important to the sword sect. Just as Lin Qing and Li Ke were rushing to Wuzhou with their people, the leaders of the various factions were all gathered in the Qin family residence within Wuzhou. The Qin family was an old family power in Wuzhou and they weren't weak. They were just a step away from becoming a first-rate power. The Qin family had a total of 3 old ancestors. The 3 of them were all at the Dao realm. Moreover, one of them was at the peak of the Dao realm and was just a step away from breaking through to the End realm. Once this old ancestor broke through to the End realm, then without a doubt, the Qin family would be able to reach the heavens in one step and become a first-rate power. Their strength was only second to the Heaven Sword sect, which was why along with the surrender of the Heaven Sword sect, the various powers in Wuzhou all saw the Qin family as the leader. This time, the Qin family gathered the various powers in Wuzhou. All of a sudden, the sect leaders of the various powers all gathered at the Qin family. At this moment, in the Qin family hall, dozens of people sat together. On the main seat, there were 3 old men. The 3 of them were the old ancestors of the Qin family. Under normal circumstances, the 3 old ancestors wouldn't bother about Qin family matters. They would just focus on breaking through to the End realm and making the Qin family a first-rate power. However, this matter was really important and concerned the future of Wuzhou. This was why the 3 old ancestors all came out of seclusion and gathered the various sect leaders. His eyes swept the people present. The old man in the middle was the one who had the highest chance of breaking through to the End realm. He was called Qin Kun. Sweeping his gaze across the crowd, Qin Kun said in a hoarse voice, "Everyone, I'm sure all of you are aware of the news of the battle in the Jian province. The Sky Sword sect has surrendered to the Sword's Gate, and Li Ke has become one of the 6 vice presidents of the Sword's Gate. Furthermore, the Sword's Gate has been promoted to a super first-rate force a few days ago. After this battle ends, I believe the Sword sect won't let us off. So, what should we do when facing the Sword sect? Submit or resist? You all should have a plan in your hearts." Qin Kun said slowly. He didn't beat around the bush and directly said the reason why he gathered everyone here. The Heaven Sword sect had submitted to the Sword sect. With that, as the overlord of Wuzhou, after the Heaven Sword sect submitted to the Sword sect, then logically speaking, Wuzhou should also be under the Sword sect. However, the Qin clan was clearly unwilling to see this scene. After all, this was an opportunity for the Qin clan to develop. Without the Sky Sword sect, the Qin clan was undoubtedly the strongest force in the Wu province. If the Qin clan could take advantage of this opportunity to control the Wu province in one fell swoop and become the new overlord of the Wu province, it would definitely be beneficial for the Qin clan's development. However, to control Wuzhou, the Qin family had a crucial problem in front of them, which was the Sword sect. It was obvious that the Sword Gate would not let go of such a big piece of fat meat like the Wu province. Thus, how to deal with the Sword Gate became the problem that the Qin family needed to consider the most. Based on the strength on the surface, the Qin family was definitely not a match for the Sword Gate. Thus, this time, the Qin family had gathered all the sect leaders within the Wu province to discuss this matter. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1974. The Qin family wanted to snatch food from the tiger's mouth and snatch Wuzhou from the Sword sect. One had to say that they were asking for death. Upon hearing Qin Kun's words, the expressions of the many sect leaders present changed slightly. Obviously, there was no one present who did not know about the Sword Gate. It was one of the top 6 powers in the world. They had 6 End-Realm deputy sect leaders. Compared to the Sword sect, the people present were just trash. No one dared to go against the Sword's Gate. After all, the strength of the Sword's Gate was there for all to see. Furthermore, according to the various things that had happened before, the new sect master of the Sword's Gate was not a soft-hearted person. On the contrary, he was decisive in killing. Looking at the fate of the Bloodblade Valley and the deceased demon sect, it was clear that almost all of them were killed. Even if there were fish that escaped the net, it would only be 2 or 3 small cats. They really did not have the courage to go against the Sword's Gate. Looking at the changes in the faces of the Sword's Gate, Qin Kun and the other 2 Qin clan's old ancestors knew that these people were extremely afraid of the Sword's Gate. They exchanged glances with one another before Qin Kun opened his mouth and said, "What's wrong? Are you all scared out of your wits? Are you also afraid of the Sword sect?" Qin Kun's tone was filled with disdain. However, the sect leaders didn't care about that at all. What a joke! Compared to their lives, what was this bit of mockery? Moreover, their strength wasn't a match for the Sword sect. Were they going to send themselves to death? None of the people present were fools. On the contrary, to be able to reach the position of the head of a sect, one was definitely a person of great intelligence. Although Qin Kun did not say it clearly, everyone knew that the Qin family was eyeing the entire Wuzhou. They wanted to use this chance to control Wuzhou. However, the sect leaders didn't think highly of the Qin family's thoughts. What a joke! Everyone could see that the Sword sect was determined to get Wuzhou. For the Qin family to want to snatch food from the tiger's mouth, they were asking for death. None of the people present dared to agree with Qin Kun. In fact, no one dared to go against the Sword sect. Looking at the expressions of everyone present, Qin Kun coldly smiled and said, "This Qin originally thought that all of you were hot-blooded, but I didn't expect that a mere sword sect would actually scare all of you to this extent. Let me tell everyone the truth. The Qin family will not hand over this Wuzhou to others. We are all powers born and raised in Wuzhou. Are we going to let an outsider rule Wuzhou? My Qin clan will be the first to disagree." Moreover, 3 days ago, this old man had already sent people to the Bajou. I believe that the Black Emperor sect is very willing to cooperate with us. The Qin family wanted to snatch food from the tiger's mouth, but they knew that there was a huge gap between their strength and the Sword sects, so the Qin family naturally wouldn't be so foolish as to seek their own destruction. Thus, they had to find a powerful backer. And in the surrounding provinces, the only one that had the ability to contend against the Sword sect was the Black Emperor sect. Thus, the Qin family naturally set their sights on the Black Emperor sect. They wanted to use the Black Emperor sect to restrain the Sword sect. Of course, the Qin family also knew that they couldn't trap a wolf without sacrificing a child. Thus, this time, they sent people to the Black Emperor sect. the Qin family was willing to use a third of the various resources in Wuzhou in exchange for the protection of the Black Emperor sect. They wanted to use the Black Emperor sect to resist the Sword sect. Hearing Qin Kun's words, all the sect leaders were stunned. Then, the expressions in the eyes of a few people changed slightly. The Qin family alone obviously couldn't stop the Sword sect. However, if the Black Emperor sect was added, then it was hard to say. Some people were already tempted. Seeing this, Qin Kun and the other two smiled slightly. It had to be said that the Qin family's appetite was very big, and they were also very bold. They actually wanted to snatch food from the tiger's mouth from the Sword sect's hands and snatch the entire Wuzhou. However, the Qin family clearly didn't know that the Black Emperor sect had already expressed goodwill towards the Sword sect. Just as the Qin family was gathering all the powers in Wuzhou, the Black Emperor sect's Xiao Qinfeng had just left the Sword sect. Under such circumstances, what choice would the Black Emperor sect make? The Qin family clearly didn't know about this and thought that the Black Emperor sect and the Sword sect were still enemies. Little did they know that after the Sword sect revealed its true strength, the Black Emperor sect's attitude completely changed. They only thought that the Black Emperor sect and the Sword sect had a battle 10 years ago. As a result, the two sects definitely had enmity, but who would have thought that enmity was nothing in the face of benefits and the overall situation? Furthermore, the Sword sect and the Black Emperor sect weren't considered mortal enemies, so there was naturally nothing that couldn't be resolved. Just as the Qin family was still fantasizing about snatching food from the tiger's mouth and taking the opportunity to control the Wuzhou, the Qin family elder that was sent out 3 days ago had also arrived at the Black Emperor sect. Within the Great Hall of the Black Emperor sect, He Sui and the two princes sat upright in the hall. Below them, an elder of the Qin family respectfully bowed and said, "I am Qin Zhao of the Qin family of the Wuzhou. Greetings, sect leader He Sui and the two princes." Hearing Qin Zhao's words, He Sui said indifferently, "Wuzhou Qin family? Why have you come all the way to my Black Emperor sect?" He Sui naturally looked down on the Qin family. A small family that wasn't even a first-rate power wasn't even worth mentioning in the eyes of the Black Emperor sect. Qin Zhao could sense the disdain and indifference in He Sui's words. However, he didn't dare to be the slightest bit dissatisfied. Hearing He Sui's words, he hurriedly replied respectfully, "I'm here to specially represent the Qin family to rely on the Black Emperor sect. The Qin family is willing to become a subsidiary force of the Black Emperor sect." "Oh, interesting. Then what does your Qin family need my Black Emperor sect to do?" Hearing Qin Zhao's words, He Sui said with interest. The Qin family had come all the way to the Black Emperor sect and expressed their willingness to become a subsidiary force of the Black Emperor sect. Even Qin Zhao himself wouldn't believe that there wasn't a request. Facing He Sui's question, Qin Zhao didn't beat around the bush and immediately replied, "My Qin family wants to control the Wuzhou and needs the help of the Black Emperor sect. In this case, the Qin family is willing to share 1/3 of the cultivation resources of the Wuzhou to the Black Emperor sect." To put it bluntly, asking the Black Emperor sect to help the Qin family control the Wuzhou was asking the Black Emperor sect to deal with the Sword sect. Hearing Qin Zhao's words, He Sui immediately laughed out loud. Haha, not understanding why He Sui suddenly laughed, Qin Zhao respectfully stood below with his head lowered. Even though he was puzzled in his heart, he didn't dare to show the slightest disrespect. The laughter echoed in the hall. After a long while, He Sui stopped laughing and looked at Qin Zhao with a spurious smile. "Your Qin family wants to control the Wuzhou, so you came to find my Black Emperor sect. You want my Black Emperor sect to help you resist the pressure of the Sword sect, right?" "Yes." Hearing this, Qin Zhao honestly nodded. Seeing Qin Zhao nod, He Sui smiled and said, "What a good plan. However, your Qin family should know that the Tiger King of my Black Emperor sect is currently in the Sword sect. He is representing me to congratulate the Sword sect on its promotion to a first-rate force. Do you think I will agree to your Qin family's request? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1975. He Sui looked at Qin Zhao with a smile that wasn't a smile. Hearing those words, Qin Zhao's face instantly paled. He wasn't stupid and naturally understood the meaning behind He Sui's words. His body couldn't help but tremble slightly. Looking at He Sui, who was seated on the main seat, Qin Zhao didn't know what to say for a moment. The Black Emperor sect had taken the initiative to express goodwill to the Sword's Gate. In this way, it meant that the Qin clan's wishful thinking had completely failed. Not only would the Black Emperor sect not help the Qin clan, it was even very likely that they would tell the Sword's Gate about this, and use this to sell a favor to the Sword's Gate. The expression in his eyes drastically changed as he looked at Qin Zhao. He Sui smiled and said, "Qin Zhao, there's a saying that a greedy person is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Your Qin clan is like that. With the current situation, your Qin clan actually wants to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. I have to say, you really don't know what's good for you. Men, capture Qin Zhao and send him to the Sword Sect." It was exactly as Qin Zhao had guessed. He Sui had no intention of helping the Qin clan. Perhaps a mere Wuzhou wasn't worth the Black Emperor sect defending the Sword Sect. The Sword Sect had already completely matured. To the Black Emperor sect, offending the Sword Sect for a mere Wuzhou was not worth it. Right now, the Black Emperor sect only wanted to coexist peacefully with the Sword Sect. Following He Sui's words, one of the Black Emperor sect's princes in the hall immediately took action. Qin Zhao did not have the slightest ability to resist and was captured by him. Of course, it was the same for the people from the Qin clan who came with Qin Zhao. After capturing Qin Zhao and the rest of the Qin clan members, He Sui immediately arranged for people to send Qin Zhao and the rest to the Sword Sect. He handed them over to Xiao Chen and allowed Xiao Chen to do whatever he wanted with them. The Qin clan could be said to have tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. A day later, a martial marquis from the Sword Sect and the Black Emperor sect arrived with Qin Zhao and the rest. Originally, he was teaching one-on-one in the cave. At this moment, Sang Xing quickly walked in and whispered a few words to Xiao Chen. Hearing this, a smile appeared on Xiao Chen's face as he turned his head to look at Luan and said, "Luan, you cultivate by yourself. Daddy has some matters to attend to and needs to leave for a while." After speaking, Xiao Chen and Sang Xing left the cave together. In the Sword Sect main hall, a martial marquis from the Black Emperor sect escorted Qin Zhao and the others to the main hall. Looking at Xiao Chen who was sitting on the main seat, the martial marquis cupped his hands and bowed, "Greetings, Sect Master Xiao." After bowing respectfully, the martial marquis also truthfully told Xiao Chen about Qin Zhao and the others heading to the Black Emperor sect. After hearing the martial marquis's words, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "Thank you, sect leader He Sui. I will definitely remember this favor." He Sui had sent Qin Zhao and the others to the Sword Sect. Xiao Chen naturally had to accept this favor. Hearing this, the martial marquis cupped his hands and replied, "Sect Master Xiao is too polite." After ordering people to first arrange for the people of the Black Emperor sect to rest, Xiao Chen looked at Qin Zhao after the people of the Black Emperor sect left. Facing Xiao Chen's gaze, Qin Zhao's expression was already ashen. After coming to the Sword Sect, Qin Zhao could almost imagine his own outcome, as well as the entire Qin family's outcome. Looking at Qin Zhao, Xiao Chen was very calm. There was even a faint smile on his face. However, no matter how one looked at it, this smile felt abnormally cold. For a person to be so stupid, it really makes people speechless. A small Qin family wants to occupy the entire Wu state, heh. With a sneer, Xiao Chen said indifferently. With the Qin family's strength, wanting to occupy the entire Wu state was indeed thinking too much. He couldn't be bothered to ask Qin Zhao any questions. In any case, the Black Emperor sect had already told him everything he needed to know. Therefore, Xiao Chen had nothing to say to Qin Zhao and the others. With that, without waiting for Qin Zhao to reply, Xiao Chen looked at Sang Xing and said, "Tell Lin Qing that the Qin family doesn't need to exist anymore. As for these people, kill them as well." Without even asking, Xiao Chen had already sentenced the Qin family to death. Hearing this, Song Xing respectfully nodded in agreement. Following which, Qin Zhao and the others were dragged out of the main hall by a group of sword sect experts and executed on the spot. Xiaochen didn't put a mere Qin family in his eyes. This time, the Qin family's plan to rely on the Black Emperor sect to fight against the sword sect had completely failed. Very quickly, Song Xing followed orders and passed on Xiao Chen's message to Lin Qing and Li Ku, who were already in Wu State. After receiving Song Xing's message, Lin Qing and Li Ku, who had already entered Wu State and arrived at the former location of the Sky Sword sect, sat in the main hall of the Sky Sword sect and looked at Li Ku with a smile. Lin Qing said indifferently, "This Qin family is really interesting. Their courage has actually grown to such an extent." "They don't know what's good for them," Li Ku replied indifferently. Li Ku was naturally not unfamiliar with the Qin family. As a power second only to the Sky Sword sect in Wu State, the Qin family was indeed ambitious. Li Ku had known this before. However, this time, the Qin family's ambition was simply too great. It could even be said that they were seeking their own death. They didn't even look at the strength of the sword sect. They dared to covet the entire Wu State. If this wasn't seeking their own death, what was it? According to Xiao Chen's meaning, the Qin family didn't need to exist anymore. Xiao Chen had already sentenced the Qin family to death. At the same time, Qin Zhao and the others had also been killed. However, at this moment, the people of the Qin family still didn't know about this. At this moment, the people of the Qin family were still fantasizing about their lives after taking over Wu State. They were still fantasizing about how to become a first-rate force. With the help of the Black Emperor sect, the people of the Qin family thought that they would definitely succeed this time. However, they didn't expect that the Black Emperor sect had already sold the Qin family out. Moreover, they had sold them out completely. A great disaster was about to befall them. It was laughable that the entire Qin family was still daydreaming. In the backyard of the Qin family, Qin Kun and the other two patriarchs were sitting together, drinking and chatting. "Is there still no news from Qin Zhao and the others?" one of the patriarchs asked. When he heard this, the other old ancestor smiled. "They have probably reached the Black Emperor sect. I think there will be news soon." The moment he said this, the old ancestor turned around and looked at Qin Kun. "Big brother, if our Qin family can successfully control Wu State, I believe that you won't be far from breaking through to the End Realm." Qin Kun was only a step away from the End Realm. When he heard this, he smiled. "How is it so easy to break through to the End Realm? However, if we have enough resources, I have some confidence. When Big Brother breaks through to the End Realm, our Qin family will be a first-rate power." When they heard this, the two of them smiled. Qin Kun and the other two were still daydreaming. What they didn't know was that Lin Qing and Li Ku had already led a bunch of sword sect experts over to the Qin family. A calamity was about to descend, but the Qin family didn't know anything at all. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1976. Everyone in the Qin family was still daydreaming. A day later, Lin Qing, Li Ku, and a group of experts from the sword sect appeared in Qin City through the transportation array. Qin City could be considered a large city in Wu Province, so it was very prosperous. Looking at the people coming and going on the streets, Lin Qing said softly, "Remember, don't destroy Qin City later." This time, Lin Qing and the others came to Qin City to attack the Qin family. As such, a battle was unavoidable. Therefore, Lin Qing reminded everyone not to affect Qin City when they attacked later. Hearing this, the people from the sword sect nodded and the group walked towards the Qin family. Along the way to the Qin family mansion, Lin Qing did not attack immediately. Instead, he set up a symbol array around the Qin family mansion. When the battle broke out, with the protection of the symbol array, the aftershocks would not affect other places in Qin City. Moreover, the people from the Qin family would not have any chance to escape. After doing all this, Lin Qing led the group to the main gate of the Qin family mansion. Seeing Lin Qing and the others slowly walking towards the Qin family mansion, 2 Qin family guards immediately opened their mouths to berate them. "Stop, who are you people?" "People from the Sword Sect," Lin Qing said indifferently when he heard the words of the 2 guards. When they heard this, the 2 guards did not react in the beginning. However, after a short while, their expressions changed drastically at the same time. Their feet involuntarily stepped back. Unfortunately, just as the 2 of them were retreating, one of the Sword Sect elders behind Lin Qing and Li Ku immediately attacked. The long sword in his hand slashed and instantly ended the lives of the 2 guards. Since they were here to destroy the Qin family, there was naturally no need to be polite. After all, after today, the Qin family would no longer exist. They openly killed their way in through the main gate. At first, the Qin family did not understand the situation when a group of people suddenly rushed in. However, soon, as the people from the Sword Sect slaughtered their way in, the Qin family began to wail in pain. With the Qin family's strength, they were naturally no match for the Sword Sect's Lin Qing and Li Ku. Moreover, this time, other than Lin Qing and Li Ku, the 2 sword leaders, Zhao Yu and Li Sui, had also come to Wuzhou. Therefore, there was no need for Lin Qing and Li Ku to make a move. The Qin family was already unable to resist. Soon, Qin Kun and the other 2 ancestors of the Qin clan, as well as a group of higher-ups of the Qin clan, appeared one after another. Facing Lin Qing's massacre, Qin Kun and the other 2 ancestors of the Qin clan appeared one after another. In the front yard, when Qin Kun and the other 2 saw Li Ku, their expressions changed immediately. Qin Kun even said subconsciously, "Li Ku, it's you, Qin Kun. In the past, I thought that you were a very stupid person. However, I did not expect that you would actually be this stupid. You would even do something like snatching food from a tiger's mouth." Faced with Qin Kun's shock, Li Ku said indifferently. Hearing Li Ku's words, Qin Kun's expression turned extremely gloomy. He did not expect that the person who came would actually be Li Ku. Looking at the people beside Li Ku, Qin Kun quickly guessed that they should all be experts from the Sword Sect. He did not expect the people from the Sword Sect to come so quickly. Moreover, there was still no news from the Black Emperor sect. There was also no news from Qin Zhao. At this point, if Qin Kun still did not sense that something was wrong, then he should really bang his head against the wall and die. There must have been an accident, Qin Kun thought to himself. However, Lin Qing did not give him too much time to think. He was also too lazy to talk nonsense with the people of the Qin family. Lin Qing said indifferently, "Kill." Xiao Chen's order was to completely destroy the Qin family. Therefore, Lin Qing naturally would not show any mercy. He also guessed Xiao Chen's intention. It was nothing more than to use the Qin family to intimidate the various large factions in Wuzhou. Therefore, he could not show any mercy to the Qin family. He had to completely destroy them with iron and blood. Only then could he achieve the effect of intimidating the other factions. Following Lin Qing's words, the experts from the Sword Sect all attacked. Although the Qin family was not a match for them, they did not give up without putting up a fight. Unfortunately, the resistance of the Qin family was not worth mentioning in the eyes of the experts from the Sword Sect. In an instant, the entire Qin family residence was filled with blood. Everyone from the Qin family, no matter who they were, was killed by the people from the Sword Sect. Looking at the scene before him, Qin Kun's heart was bleeding. One had to know that these were all his clansmen. Looking at Lin Qing and Li Ku who had not yet attacked, Qin Kun coldly shouted with bloodshot eyes. "Li Ku, isn't your Sword Sect too overbearing? What did my Qin family do that your Sword Sect has to treat my Qin family like this? Okay, you old fellow, don't you know what you did? Qin Zhao went to the Black Emperor sect, you know that, right?" "Ah, I really don't know. With your Qin family's strength, who gave you the courage to target Wuzhou? What a joke." Facing Qin Kun's question, Li Ku did not reply. Instead, it was Lin Qing who laughed. Hearing Lin Qing's words, Qin Kun and the other 2 old ancestors of the Qin family were stunned. The matter was exposed. Moreover, the Sword Sect already knew about it. they didn't expect the matter to be exposed so quickly. Facing the shock of the three, Lin Qing was too lazy to talk nonsense and directly said, "Okay, enough nonsense. Prepare to die." As he said that, Lin Qing directly attacked. A terrifying aura surged into the sky from his body. Feeling Lin Qing's aura, Qin Kuan's expression changed. "End realm. You are a deputy sect leader of the sword sect." He didn't recognize Lin Qing, so at the start, Qin Kuan didn't know who he was. However, sensing that Lin Qing's cultivation had stepped into the end realm, Qin Kuan guessed right away that Lin Qing was the same as Li Ku, a deputy sect leader of the sword sect. He didn't expect the sword sect to send out 2 end realm experts at once. Since that was the case, the Qin family had no way to survive. 1 end realm expert was enough to make the Qin family unable to fight back, much less 2. This gave the Qin family no chance at all. Qin Kuan regretted in his heart, but unfortunately, Lin Qing didn't give him a chance. He stepped out and instantly appeared in front of Qin Kuan, punching out. Seeing that, although Qin Kuan tried to block, unfortunately, the difference in cultivation was too huge. With just 1 fist, Lin Qing sent Qin Kuan flying. At the same time, along with Lin Qing attacking, Li Ku naturally didn't stay idle. He immediately attacked the other 2 old ancestors of the Qin family. In the hands of Lin Qing and Li Ku, Qin Kuan and the other 2 old ancestors of the Qin family weren't their opponents at all. In just 1 move, they were forced to retreat and were heavily injured. Blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth, but Lin Qing didn't give Qin Kuan any chance to breathe. After sending him flying, he didn't stop and once again attacked Qin Kuan. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1977. The Qin family wasn't able to wait for the help of the Black Emperor sect. On the contrary, they were mercilessly slaughtered by the sword sect experts. Qin Kuan and the other 2 old ancestors of the Qin family couldn't fight back at all in the hands of Lin Qing and Li Ku. At the same time, the other members of the Qin family were the same. Compared to the sword sect, the Qin family was too weak. They weren't even on the same level. Under the intense battle, in just 2 hours, Qin Kuan and the other 2 ancestors of the Qin clan were killed by Lin Qing and the other 2. Even until their deaths, Qin Kuan and the other 2 ancestors would never have thought that the Qin clan would be so easily annihilated by the Sword's Gate. Lin Qing and Li Ku didn't hold back at all against the Qin family. Anyone from the Qin family was wiped out in a short day. After dealing with the Qin family matters, Lin Qing and Li Ku directly took charge of Qin City. At the same time, they sent people to invite the sect leaders of the other powers of Wuzhou to Qin City. They directly chose Qin City to meet the sect leaders of the various powers of Wuzhou. This was undoubtedly to give them a warning. If anyone wanted to go against the sword sect, then the Qin family had foresight. Without other top powers interfering in Wuzhou matters, it would be much easier for the sword sect to control Wuzhou. Xiaochen handed the matters of Wuzhou to Lin Qing and Li Ku. At this moment, in the sword sect, Xiaochen was busy dealing with other matters. He didn't need to worry about Wuzhou. After all, they sent out 2 End Realm deputy sect leaders. If they couldn't even deal with a small Wuzhou, then that would be weird. 3 days passed. The sect leaders of the various powers of Wuzhou all gathered in Qin City. In these 3 days, the news of the Qin family being wiped out had spread throughout Wuzhou. It did not take more than 4 hours. From the moment the experts of Sword's Gate stepped into the Qin clan, it had been less than 4 hours. The Qin clan, which was still fantasizing about dominating the Wu prefecture, was destroyed just like that. They did not even have the slightest ability to retaliate. The destruction of the Qin family made the various powers of Wuzhou recognize reality. In front of the sword sect, apart from submitting, they didn't have any other choice. Within the Qin family manor. At this moment, the Qin family manor had been cleaned up. The corpses of the Qin family members were also cleaned up. At this moment, Lin Qing and Li Ke sat on the main seats in the hall that belonged to the Qin family. There were many experts of the sword sect. At the same time, the sect leaders of the various powers of Wuzhou were present. In less than 10 days, this was the second time that all the sect leaders of the large and small factions in Wuzhou had gathered at the Qin family. However, unlike the last time, the Qin clan had been annihilated this time, and the Swords Gate had become the host of this gathering. His gaze swept across the crowd and Lin Qing was the first to speak. Perhaps some of you don't know me. I am one of the 6 deputy sect leaders of the Sword Sect. My name is Lin Qing. As for the person beside me, I believe everyone is very familiar with him. I won't waste time here. Wuzhou must belong to the Sword Sect. I believe no one has any objections to this, right? Lin Qing was not polite in the slightest when speaking to these people. Thus, he went straight to the point and announced the Sword Sect's sovereignty over Wuzhou in front of everyone. Wuzhou must return to the Sword Sect's control. This was very clear. No one could change it. Hearing Lin Qing's words, many of the sect leaders present chose to remain silent. Although some of them still felt conflicted, they did not dare to speak out in opposition. What a joke! Even the Qin family had been wiped out. If anyone dared to jump out and oppose the Sword Sect, they were really tired of living. No one dared to object. Seeing that everyone had chosen to remain silent, Lin Qing smiled slightly. Very good. It seems that no one has any objections. Everyone was silent. Lin Qing smiled. Then, he discussed in detail the matters of Wuzhou with the sect leaders present. According to Xiao Chen's method, since the Qin family had been wiped out, the deterrence effect had been achieved. Next, it was time to give some benefits. The benefits were nothing more than cultivation resources. Of course, there was also the protection of the Sword Sect. As the various major powers in Wuzhou, since the Sword Sect had already taken control of Wuzhou, then these powers would naturally receive the protection of the Sword Sect. In the future, if there were any matters that concern their survival, the Sword Sect would not stand by and do nothing. After Lin Qing's efforts, the various sect leaders present slowly accepted the fact that the Sword Sect had taken control of Wuzhou. Firstly, the Sword Sect taking control of Wuzhou was not something they could object to. This was something that was inevitable. No one could stop it. Secondly, the Sword Sect taking control of Wuzhou was actually beneficial to the various major powers present. This was equivalent to giving the various major powers in Wuzhou a backer. It was good to lean against a big tree for shade. To the various major powers in Wuzhou, the Sword Sect was a big tree. It was a big tree that reached the sky. Under Xiao Chen's carrot and stick policies, Lin Qing and Li Ke very quickly stabilized the various major powers in Wuzhou. Of course, this was only the beginning. To truly stabilize Wuzhou, Lin Qing and Li Ke still had to put in a lot of hard work. Furthermore, the two of them did not plan on returning to the Sword Sect immediately. They would probably stay in Wuzhou for quite some time. After all, Wuzhou had just been stabilized. The Sword Sect would definitely send experts to hold the fort there. The matters in Wuzhou were basically settled. Originally, there were no particularly powerful factions in Wuzhou. If it were not for the reckless Qin family, probably none of the major or minor powers in Wuzhou would dare to challenge the Sword Sect. After stabilizing Wuzhou, Lin Qing and Li Ke issued the first sword order. It was to completely eliminate the remaining forces of the Bloodblade Valley in Wuzhou. Back then, the 3 factions of the Bloodblade Valley had joined forces to attack the Sword Sect. In the end, they were defeated by the Sword Sect. Lin Gang and the other experts of the Bloodblade Valley had died. However, the headquarters of the Bloodblade Valley was in Wuzhou. There were definitely some remaining forces of the Bloodblade sect left behind. As for eliminating the remaining forces of the Bloodblade Valley, on one hand, it was to eliminate them completely. On the other hand, it was to see which of the major and minor powers in Wuzhou were outwardly obedient to the Sword Sect. Xiao Chen's intention was to directly kill those who outwardly complied. Leaving them alive would be a disaster. After the order was issued, the major and minor powers in Wuzhou quickly took action. In the Sword Sect, Xiaochen looked at Lin Qing's message. He knew that the situation in Wuzhou had basically stabilized. A smile appeared on his face. The stability of Wuzhou was naturally a good thing for the future development of the Sword Sect. Sitting together with Xiaochen, Sangxing naturally knew about the current situation in Wuzhou. At this moment, he also smiled and nodded. Sect leader, the matters in Wuzhou are basically no longer a problem. I'm afraid that we will have to pay more attention to the matters of the 6 sect competition. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation votes. Chapter 1978. The 6 Sect Grand Meeting. Upon hearing Sangxing's words, Xiaochen nodded slightly. Just a few days ago, the Verdant Sect had sent an invitation to the 6 Sect Grand Meeting. To put it bluntly, the 6 Sect Grand Meeting was a gathering of the 6 super first-rate forces. It was originally a 5 Sect Grand Meeting, but this time, following the rise of the Sword Sect, the 5 Sect Grand Meeting had become a 6 Sect Grand Meeting. Since the Verdant Sect was willing to send an invitation, it was equivalent to the other 5 super first-rate forces acknowledging the fact that the Sword Sect had been promoted to a super first-rate force. Therefore, they had invited the Sword Sect to participate in the 6 Sect Grand Meeting. Therefore, Xiaochen would definitely attend the 6 Sect Grand Meeting. According to Sangxing, the 6 Sect Grand Meeting was nothing more than a gathering of the 6 super first-rate forces. It should be known that a super first-rate force had already surpassed the scope of a first-rate force. Currently, all the super first-rate forces in the Great Thousand World, including the Sword Sect, had the goal of becoming one of the 10 Great Ling Tian sects. As such, a super first-rate force was considered a threat to the 10 Great Ling Tian sects. Therefore, the 10 Great Ling Tian sects' attitude towards the 6 super first-rate forces was not considered friendly. It was precisely because of this that the 6 super first-rate forces had no choice but to band together in order to guard against the 10 Great Ling Tian sects. It was also because of this that there were rarely any major battles between the super first-rate forces. This was also what the Black Emperor sect had always been wary of. After all, the 10 Great Ling Tian sects had always been looking forward to a major battle between the 6 super first-rate forces, especially the 10 Great Ling Tian sects that were ranked at the bottom. This was because once a super first-rate force succeeded in becoming one of the 10 Great Ling Tian sects, it meant that one of the Ling Tian sects would definitely fall from the spiritual pedestal stage. Of course, although a super first-rate force was strong, its threat to the 10 Great Ling Tian sects was limited, especially the few Ling Tian sects that were ranked at the top. They did not even take a super first-rate force like the Sword Sect seriously. Therefore, both sides could coexist peacefully. This time, the Verdant Sect took the initiative to send an invitation. Moreover, it was personally sent by a vice sect master. This could be considered as giving the Sword Sect enough face. As such, the Sword Sect naturally had to participate in this 6 Sect conference. However, before participating in the 6 Sect Grand Meeting, Xiaochen still had one more thing to do, and that was to visit the Dan Valley. There was still a year before the 6 Sect Grand Meeting began. Before that, Xiaochen intended to personally make a trip to the Dan Valley. As for his objective, it was naturally to seek medicine. Xiaochen, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, Qin Shuru, Qinyu, Long Yang, and the others all needed elixirs if they wanted to improve their cultivation quickly. Although the Sword Sect also had its own alchemists, compared to the Dan Valley, there was a huge difference. There were many high-grade elixirs that the Sword Sect's alchemists could not refine. Moreover, in terms of alchemy resources, the Sword Sect was also much worse than the Dan Valley. There were many elixirs that the Sword Sect could not refine. It was also because of this that Xiaochen decided to personally make a trip to the Dan Valley. It was not uncommon to make a special trip to the Dan Valley to seek medicine in the Great Thousand World. After all, the Dan Valley was a gathering place for alchemists. In the Great Thousand World, more than 80% of the alchemists gathered in the Dan Valley. In particular, the high-grade alchemists were almost all contracted by the Dan Valley. Therefore, if one wanted to obtain good and high-grade elixirs, the only way was to go to the Dan Valley. This was what Zhou Song and Wu Huan had told him. According to Zhou Song and Wu Huan, although the Dan Valley was ranked among the top 10 Lingtian sects and was powerful, under normal circumstances, the Dan Valley rarely participated in the affairs of the Great Thousand World. They were all focused on alchemy. It could be said that the Dan Valley was a permanent neutral sect and never participated in the competition of the Great Thousand World. No matter who it was, as long as they could afford the price or meet the conditions of the Dan Valley, they would be able to obtain the elixirs from the Dan Valley. Xiaochen planned to make a trip to the Dan Valley, but he did not set off immediately because Xiaochen was waiting for Qin Shuru and the other girls. Going to the Dan Valley would also be a good opportunity to take Qin Shuru and the other girls out for a walk. After all, after coming to the Great Thousand World, Xiaochen basically did not leave the Sword Sect. Every day, he would either deal with the matters of the Sword Sect or cultivate. As a result, Qin Shuru and the other girls also cultivated vigorously like him. After so many years, it was time to relax. Of course, there was also Long Qing and Xin Yuanling, but the two of them would not necessarily go. These two fellows were now focused on improving their cultivation and catching up with him. In this regard, Xiaochen was helpless. After waiting for 3 days, Qin Shuru and the other girls finally came out of seclusion one after another. This time, the 5 girls had gained a lot from cultivating in the Heaven Spirit Pagoda. Their strength had also improved a lot, and all of them had stepped into the Immortal Emperor realm. This made Xiaochen very happy. After the 5 girls came out of seclusion, Xiaochen arranged the matters of the Sword Sect. The next day, the group set off for the Dan Valley. This time, there were many people. Qin Shuru and the other girls, Luan Luan, Qing Yao, Qing Luo, Fei Mei, and Lan, Si Ju, Lu Zhu, Xiao Qing, Bai Ruyue, Wu Huan, Yan Song, and several other experts of the Sword Sect. The group left the Sword Sect in a grandiose manner. Wu Huan and Yan Song were there to protect Xiaochen. After all, as the sect master of the Sword Sect, Xiaochen's safety could not be a problem. In order to be absolutely safe, Wu Huan even brought along a spatial compass. He was afraid that if they encountered any danger that was difficult to deal with, Xiaochen would be able to escape. Xiaochen did not have much of an opinion about Wu Huan and Yan Song going with them. The group left the Sword Sect. Perhaps because she had not gone out to play for a long time, the little girl Luan Luan was abnormally excited. She insisted on riding on Xiaochen's neck and happily chattered non-stop. Xiaochen did not refuse. After all, during this period of time, he had indeed been a little cold to Luan Luan, causing the little girl to be quite resentful. Fortunately, Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue were accompanying her. Otherwise, the little girl would probably cause trouble again. On the way out of the Sword Sect, Xiaochen wore casual clothes and did not reveal his identity. In truth, after being the sect master of the Sword Sect for so many years, Xiaochen had not properly strolled around the Jian province. Accompanied by Qin Shuru and the other girls, Xiaochen arrived at a city called Hundred Sword City. This was a city close to the border of the Jian province, adjacent to the Bazhou. Strolling along the streets of Hundred Sword City, Xiaochen could not help but sigh as he looked at the lively streets with Qin Shuru and the other girls by his side. It must be said that I am indeed not qualified to be the sect master of the Sword Sect. After so many years, there are many places in the Jian province that I have not been to. For example, I have never heard of this Hundred Swords City before. Who would have thought that there would be such a bustling city at the border? Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1979. Xiaochen had been in charge of the Sword Sect for almost 20 years. However, Xiaochen was not very familiar with the major cities in the Jian province. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Yang Song smiled and said, "Sect Master is very busy every day. Moreover, Hundred Swords City is located at the edge of the Jian province. It's not considered a big city. Yang Song was obviously more familiar with Hundred Swords City than Xiao Chen. As they walked, Yang Song introduced the situation of Hundred Swords City to Xiao Chen. According to Yang Song, Hundred Swords City was located at the border between the Jian province and the Ba province. Therefore, cultivators from the two provinces often gathered here. Moreover, there were no major forces in Hundred Swords City. Therefore, even though Hundred Swords City was bustling with noise and excitement, it was actually considered a city of chaos. Especially before the rise of the Swords Gate, the Hundred Swords City was even more so. Many martial artists from the Bajou came to the Hundred Swords City with their heads held high, not for any other reason but because they had the backing of the Black Emperor sect. When cultivators from the two provinces gathered, there would naturally be some fights. After listening to Yang Song's introduction, Xiao Chen had a preliminary understanding of Hundred Swords City. In general, although Hundred Swords City was located in the Jian province, due to the decline of the Sword sect, the cultivators from the Ba province were obviously superior to the cultivators from the Jian province in Hundred Swords City. However, this situation had improved with the rise of the Sword sect. After all, the Sword sect was now a super first-rate force and its strength was not any weaker than the Black Emperor sect. As a result, the cultivators from the Jian province naturally had some confidence at the border between the two provinces. It had been a long time since they went out. Qin Shuru and the other women were very excited when they saw the bustling Hundred Swords City. At this time, the 5 women were holding Luan Luan's hand. Accompanied by 2 elders from the Sword sect, they strolled around and soon bought many things. Of course, they were all women's items. Xiao Chen naturally did not say anything about this. Seeing the happy appearance of the 5 women, Xiao Chen was also in a good mood. Thinking about it, it had been a long time since he had relaxed like this. Especially after he became the sect master of the Sword sect, he had not brought the 5 women out to play like this. He was in a good mood, but this good mood did not last long. Soon, Xiao Chen heard a commotion. Looking for the source of the sound, he saw Qin Shuru and the 5 women arguing with a luxuriously dressed young master. Frowning slightly, Xiao Chen looked at the young master and walked towards the 5 women. As he walked towards Qin Shuru and the 5 women, Xiao Chen had already heard the young master's words. Such beauties, it seems that this young master's luck is pretty good today. Hearing this, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with a cold light. Xiao Chen had already guessed the whole story. Looking at the young master, Xiao Chen's heart grew colder. He actually dared to have ideas about Qin Shuru and the others. He was simply courting death. Not only Xiao Chen, but Yang Song and Wu Huan who were following behind Xiao Chen also had unfriendly expressions. He even dared to take liberties with the women of the Sword sect's sect master. This young master clearly did not know the difference between life and death. Xiao Chen walked up to Qin Shuru and the 5 women. When they saw him, the coldness on their faces receded slightly. Looking at Xiao Chen, graceful Hongxiu spoke first. Husband, knowing what graceful Hongxiu wanted to say, Xiao Chen nodded slightly, then looked at the young master and said, "Do you want to die?" The cause of the matter was very simple. When the young master saw Qin Shuru and the 5 women, he immediately went up to them. Unfortunately, Qin Shuru and the other women completely ignored him. How could the young master let go of such beauties? He forcefully blocked Qin Shuru and the 5 women and started arguing. Qin Shuru and the other women were indeed attracting bees and butterflies. However, Xiao Chen was now the sect master of the Sword sect. How could he allow his women to be coveted by others? Xiao Chen coldly looked at the young man and said. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the young man was obviously used to being a playboy. Perhaps he had some influence in the Hundred Swords City, so he didn't put Xiao Chen in his eyes at all. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the young man didn't hold back at all. Instead, he sneered. "You're their husband? This young master has taken a fancy to your women." The young master actually dared to say such words in front of Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Xiao Chen was so angry that he laughed. At the same time, Yang Song, who was following Xiao Chen, was so angry that he could not help but attack. In the Jian province, there was actually someone who dared to be disrespectful to Xiao Chen. Forcefully suppressing the anger in his heart, at this moment, as long as Xiao Chen said a word, Yang Song would definitely not hesitate to attack and kill this playboy young master in front of him. Looking at this person with a sneer, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "Very good. It seems like you're a top figure in 100 Swords City." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, one of the guards behind the young master coldly said, "Heh, brat, do you know who our young master is? He's the only son of the Black Emperor's sex Marquis Evergreen." The young master's name was He Sheng. His father was the Black Emperor's sex Marquis Evergreen, He Changqing. He originally thought that He Sheng should be someone from 100 Swords City. Who would have thought that he was actually the son of the Black Emperor's sex Marquis Evergreen? It seemed that he had come out to play. To ordinary people, the Black Emperor's sex Marquis Evergreen was indeed an existence that could not be offended. However, to Xiao Chen, not to mention the only son of the Marquis Evergreen, even if it was the Marquis Evergreen himself, Xiao Chen would not be afraid at all. After introducing himself, He Sheng's face revealed a trace of arrogance. Relying on his father's identity, He Sheng had bullied others many times since he was young. Moreover, every time, due to his father's power, no one dared to do anything to him. However, He Sheng had clearly forgotten a problem. This was the Jian province, not their Ba province. Moreover, the Sword sect had already risen and did not fear the Black Emperor sect. Therefore, Xiao Chen did not care about He Sheng's identity at all. Looking at Xiao Chen arrogantly, He Sheng sneered and said, "You can scram. If the woman stays, this young master can forget about what happened just now." He Sheng did not place Xiao Chen in his eyes at all. Hearing this, the coldness in Xiao Chen's eyes continued to gather as he said indifferently, "Marquis Evergreen? Ha, not to mention that you're the only son of the Marquis Evergreen. Even if the Marquis Evergreen himself stood before me, he would not dare to speak to me in such a manner." Yang Song. Xiao Chen naturally had nothing to say to He Sheng. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Song, who had been standing behind Xiao Chen, took a step forward. At the same time, the Tao realm aura in his body suddenly erupted. Sensing Yang Song's aura, the few Black Emperor sect experts beside He Sheng changed their expressions. Then, the leader of the group unconsciously exclaimed, "Tao realm expert, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1980. He didn't expect Yang Song to be an End Realm expert. One must know that even He Sheng's father, Evergreen Marquis He Changqing, was just a Tao realm expert. His cultivation was similar to Yang Song's. To be able to have a Tao realm expert following him, Xiao Chen's identity wasn't simple. Moreover, He Sheng and his followers weren't strong enough to deal with a Tao realm expert like Yang Song. Moreover, Yang Song wasn't the only one by Xiao Chen's side. Their expressions changed as they felt the terrifying aura coming from Yang Song's body. How could He Sheng and the others not know that they had kicked an iron board? The person in the lead seemed to have reached the comprehension realm. He should be an elder of the Black Emperor sect. This time, he was specifically in charge of protecting He Sheng. Without hesitation, the elder said to He Sheng, "Young master, leave quickly." Facing a Tao realm expert, they obviously weren't his match. He could only let He Sheng leave first while he held back Yang Song. Unfortunately, when he heard that, Wu Huan, who was standing beside Xiao Chen, said calmly, "Don't you think it's too late to leave now?" As he said that, Wu Huan locked down the surrounding space. Feeling the space being locked down, the Black Emperor's sect elder's expression changed. He couldn't even speak properly as he stuttered, "You. End realm." Yang Song being a Tao realm expert already shocked He Sheng and the others. But now, Wu Huan locked down the space. This was obviously the method of an End realm expert. An End realm expert was already on the same level as the four princes of the Black Emperor sect. Who would have thought that Xiao Chen would have so many experts by his side? If it was just Yang Song alone, He Sheng might have a chance to escape. But with Wu Huan, He Sheng had no chance at all. At this moment, He Xing was completely dumbfounded. He had no idea what kind of person he had provoked. An End Realm expert, that was someone even his father had to treat carefully. He Xing had personally seen how respectful his father was when facing the four kings. At this moment, there was a true End Realm expert standing in front of him. Compared to He Xing, who was scared out of his wits, the elder beside him still maintained a trace of rationality. In the Sword Province, there could only be one identity for Xiaochen to be able to have a Dao Realm expert and an End Realm expert by his side at such a young age. Looking at Xiaochen, the elder said helplessly, "You're the sect leader of the Sword Sect." He finally guessed Xiaochen's identity. This way, Xiaochen's words weren't exaggerated at all. Indeed, even He Xing's father, He Changqing, didn't dare to act arrogantly in front of Xiaochen. Moreover, He Xing actually dared to covet Xiaochen's woman. Wasn't this just asking for death? He couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with He Xing. Yang Song directly attacked. First, he killed the Black Emperor sect elder who was protecting He Xing. Then, he cleanly killed He Xing with a punch. Killing He Xing was nothing to Xiaochen. A look of displeasure flashed across his eyes. Xiaochen said unhappily, "What a party pooper." Within the 100 Swords City, Xiaochen killed He Xing. Within the Black Emperor sect, in Marquis Changqing's cave, He Changqing's face was extremely gloomy. He sat on the main seat and looked at the elder of the Black Emperor sect below him. He Changqing roared furiously, "No matter who it is, I will make you accompany my son in death." As He Changqing's only son, He Xing naturally had a life token. Therefore, when Xiaochen killed He Xing, He Changqing already knew. When he thought about how his only son was killed, He Changqing was furious. He swore to take revenge for his son. He ordered a thorough investigation. Facing the furious He Changqing, the elder of the Black Emperor sect hurriedly responded respectfully. Then, he hurried towards the 100 Swords City. He didn't know about He Changqing's anger. However, even if he knew, Xiaochen probably wouldn't care. A mere He Changqing was nothing in Xiaochen's eyes. After staying in the 100 Swords City for a day, Xiaochen and the rest used the teleportation array in the 100 Swords City to leave the Jian province. They arrived at a large city in the Ba province called Six Corner City. Six Corner City was indeed a large city in the Ba province. It was much more prosperous than the 100 Swords City. When Xiaochen and the rest arrived at Six Corner City, He Changqing finally found some clues in the Black Emperor sect. He also found out that the person who killed his son was currently in Six Corner City. After killing his only son, not only did he not run away, he even dared to enter the Ba province. When he heard this news, He Changqing personally led a group of people to Six Corner City. He Changqing didn't know the identity of Xiaochen and the rest. He hurriedly rushed to Six Corner City. At this moment, the city lord of Six Corner City was already waiting there. When he saw He Changqing walk out of the teleportation array, the city lord of Six Corner City respectfully stepped forward and bowed. "Greetings, Marquis Changqing." "Cut the crap. Where are they?" He Changqing wasn't in the mood to talk nonsense when facing the city lord of Six Corner City. He immediately asked where Xiaochen and the rest were staying. When he found out that Xiaochen and the rest were staying in an inn in the city, He Changqing immediately led a group of people there. It was already late at night. Xiaochen had taken care of the entire inn. At this moment, they were sitting in the courtyard drinking and chatting. However, at this moment, Wu Huan suddenly smiled and said, "Junior, it seems like trouble has come knocking." Xiaochen knew what Wu Huan was talking about. He smiled faintly and said, "It's fine. It's just a marquis. How could Senior be afraid of him?" Just as the two of them finished speaking, the courtyard door was kicked open as expected. Then, He Changqing angrily led a group of people in. When he saw Xiaochen and the rest, He Changqing angrily shouted, "You're the ones who killed Xing." He Changqing did indeed spoil He Xing to the extreme. Facing the furious He Changqing, Xiaochen's expression didn't change at all. He said indifferently, "It was me. You're courting death." When he heard Xiao Chen's words, the killing intent in Yi Changqing's eyes was extremely dense. With killing intent in his eyes, Yi Changqing directly slapped out. A terrifying aura surged out from Yi Changqing's body. The palm print formed from spiritual energy fiercely pressed down on Xiao Chen. It was as if he wanted to smash Xiao Chen into meat paste. However, although Yi Changqing's attack was filled with hatred, it was a pity that before it could get close to Xiao Chen, it was easily resolved by Wu Wan. It didn't pose any threat at all. Seeing Wu Wan resolve his attack so easily, Yi Changqing's expression changed slightly. He couldn't help but say, "End realm expert? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."